Welcome to the Provo Municipal Council work meeting. It is Tuesday, January 7th, 2025, and it is 1:05 p.m. Elected officials here today are Councilor George Hanley, Councilor Craig Christensen, Councilor Travis Hoban, Councilor Patrice Kay, Councilor Rachel Whipple, Councilor Becky Bogdan, and Councilor Gary Garrett. Although this is a public meeting, only the presenters and those invited by the council may speak or ask questions unless otherwise invited by the chair. Please wait to speak until called on by the council chair. When speaking, please be sure to use a microphone so that the record is clear and those attending virtually can hear you. Please also be sure to limit side conversations that interfere with the audio recording. If you need to have a side conversation, please step out of the workroom. And Justin, are you? Oh. First one, discussion reviewing the progress of fiscal year 2025 council budget priorities. This will be presented by Justin Harrison.
All right. Council, if you don't mind, I'm gonna sit here so that I'm not in the way of the screen, and so it's a little more comfortable. Yeah, have a conversation. So, wanted to start off by just reviewing the budget priorities that you all adopted for the current fiscal year 2025. Give a little progress report and update, and use that as a primer to get into the goal setting exercise that we're going to do for FY 2026. So if y'all remember, there were 5 budget priorities that you adopted this time last year. What were adopted were some kind of overarching priorities that also included a sub bullet point that was really budget specific. So those 5 priorities included increasing owner occupancy, active transportation and street safety, exploring and developing parking plans in a couple of areas in the city, employee talent retention, and then continuing the efficient delivery of city services. So just as a primer and reminder, this first goal of increasing owner occupancy to 50% by 2029 through a balance of home types throughout the city, that sub bullet point that was budget specific, that was adopted by the council, was to fund the zoning update. This is something that you all did actually through an appropriation from the Legacy CIP fund in FY 2024, so before the fiscal year. So it wasn't included in the budget, but it was funded, and it is currently ongoing. So Development Services has worked with the council office. We prepared an RFP, and Development Services put that RFP out to bid, and Development Services is currently working with that consultant, SOMAS, to do that zoning update. They are working hard on it, and that timeline was expected to be about a year. So we should have an update soon on what and when that will come forward to the council. So that was really quick, but any specific questions on the zoning update, what's currently going on?
So
anything.
you think they'll have something in this fiscal year and calendar year?
That is a great question. So last I spoke with Development Services, the timeline looked anywhere between 9 and 12 months. I'm trying to think offhand when that RFP closed and they started. So I would assume they're about halfway through. So we'll circle back with Development Services and see exactly where they're at.
Councilor Whipple.
Yeah, my understanding with that zoning update is, there can be a couple components. One is just to completely simplify our zoning code, because we have those old 4-digit use code things. It's incredibly clunky and difficult to use. So just getting that cleaned up and modernized will be helpful for our staff, but also for people who are trying to figure out what their restrictions are for the use of their property.
Are they already doing that work, or they?
That's what they're doing.
Okay.
The other thing that is possible with this zoning update is considering how we want to change the way our residential codes are, right? If we wanted to do something consistent with the general plan to allow for smaller lot sizes than what are currently allowed by our residential zones, when they're coming back to us with the simplified one, that would be the opportunity to say, okay, we want to change some of these parameters so that we can accomplish these general plan goals. And that's one way that we could kind of change that balance of home types, or, you know, start to shift it gradually by making allowances for that. And so however long those discussions for those kind of substantial instead of formal changes would then be on us, because we could make that take a long time with our conversation. But getting it cleaned up and simplified first is already an amazing thing. But to fully do this, we're gonna have to have fun conversations on how we may shift those so that going forward, there are different opportunities.
We'd like to acknowledge that the mayor, Michelle Kifusi, has joined us. All right, any other questions on this?
On this, we don't need to put any more money into it right now for this budget year.
Correct. Yeah, so the appropriation was for $200,000 that came from the legacy CIP fund. That was some of the leftover funds that were intended to be allocated for some of the plans that were being done. So that is paid for.
Okay. So if we want to keep something like this as a goal for this year, that we can understand that we're still working on this goal from last year and keep it, but we could also potentially look at other ways through our budget we could try to increase homeowner occupation. It wouldn't disturb this existing goal, but we could kind of supplement it if we wanted to.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, then when we get into that part of the conversation, maybe we can have that in our minds.
Perfect. All right. Any other questions? All right. So I apologize. This slide has a lot of text. There's a lot of colors. But honestly, there was a better way to do it. So this was the budget priority that was adopted related specifically to active transportation and street safety. So the budget priority was to prioritize supplemental grant monies for matching funds, for additional dollars not used for grants toward sidewalks around schools. And so listed on the slide are the 7, 8, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 projects that were included in the CIP related to sidewalk replacement. That was really the focus of the council. And so initially, just the first 2 projects were funded as of the adoption of the CIP last fiscal year. Since then, there's been fairly significant updates, and I want to give some kudos to David Nicholson, who's hiding in the back there. You provided some great updates, and David, I don't want to steal your thunder. If you're happy to, or more than welcome to jump in if you'd like to. But Public Works, I feel like, has really taken to heart the council's goal and has looked for ways to fund these initially unfunded projects that you were focused on. So again, the first 2 projects were funded. The first project of sidewalk replacement of $500,000. So that's used to fund 3 different projects each year, including trip hazard repair, so where sidewalks have been elevated or heaved, sidewalk replacement, and also road rehab. And so those are focused on a variety of projects throughout the city. Road rehab includes installing pedestrian or ADA ramps along those areas that are being being fixed. The second project was related to school sidewalk and pedestrian improvements. So half of the funds were used on the 1100 West sidewalk improvements from 600 South to Shoreline Middle School. And the remaining funds are going to be put towards 600 South, 600 South and 1400 West sidewalk projects. So those have either been expended or are anticipated to be used. The next couple of projects were initially unfunded in the CIP, but have now been funded. So you have the 4380 Foothill Drive project that has now been funded. That's been funded through county public transit tax, or the fifth, and that will be that'll be constructed this summer. Similar to the next project there, Canyon Road to 3450 Foothill. That will also be constructed this summer and was funded through those same funds. 600 South to 1100 West, to 1600 West. So that was initially unfunded. It is now partially funded.
That's the front runner one. No.
The middle school.
Yep.
Oh.
Between Sunset and.
Yes. So the next project, the new sidewalk and curb and gutter, was unfunded. That is the only project. It still remains unfunded. But the next project, Shoreline Middle School asphalt, or the temporary asphalt path, that was actually changed to a permanent path of sidewalk as opposed to temporary path, and has been funded. It's been mentioned in some of the other projects. And then some of the other projects listed included school sidewalk, school related sidewalks that have been partially funded, also through the fifth. And so those projects consist of 3 different school related safety projects, including Wasatch Elementary improvements on Apple Avenue, Locust Lane, and 500 East, and 800 North, Refuge Islands, and intersection improvements, and also 900 East and 560 North, Refuge Islands, and intersection improvements. So quite a few of these projects that initially weren't funded have now been funded, and Public Works has really put a lot of effort into ensuring that priority was at the forefront of what they're looking for. Any questions on those projects?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really grateful that we've made all this progress, and maybe this is just related to a future discussion about next year. But since 2 of them are partially funded, of course, I'm not sure what that means exactly, like, to what degree that was partially funded, and then 1 is still unfunded. So I guess the open question I have is how much of a priority does this continue to be, since it seemed like this was an unending project in some ways, maybe not entirely, but it seems like there's just a lot of need. So I don't know who's the right person to answer that, but I mean, is it our sense that we still need to keep this a priority because we're not done yet? That's my question.
I think that's what we're here today to figure out. That's number 2.
I have a question as well. So on these fundings that were initially unfunded, is most of this funding from county and from other outside agencies that they've managed to secure it?
I'm going to let David take that, because it appears that a majority of it's coming from fifth.
Thanks. Yeah, so most of it's gonna be. I'm sorry. First time. So I think to answer that question, most of the funding here that we've got is from the 5th of the 5th. That's how we've been able to fund all of these projects. With the exception of the 600 south from 11th west to 14th west, we'll be using that school related one that we have some left over there. And so those are the two sources that we have then.
So which portion is unfunded of that from 1100 to 1600?
So that would be from, yeah, I apologize, I've been saying it wrong. So we have funded 1400 west to 1600 west. What is unfunded is from 14 to 11.
And are we still planning on doing that stretch of 1600 west where they botched all that sidewalk and curb gun?
Yeah, those two developments there, we have included it as part of that project.
So it'll actually go around the corner and down to the end of that?
Yeah, about, a couple hundred feet down 1600 west, that's correct.
But we still don't have money, just to repeat, we still don't have money from 1100 to 1400
That's correct.
west.
And that's where it's saying it's partially.
And that's the safer school grant money from the state, right?
Initially, we were going to use that money for that, but we were getting about 100,000 from them, and that's why we kind of turned our focus to say, well, with that amount of money, we could do a temporary asphalt pad. It turned out their process was a little bit longer than anticipated, and with some of the funds that we received, initially the quarter cent tax, or the fifth of the fifth, sorry, we were going to use that for this, and then with these leftover funds, we just decided to shift that focus from that rather than doing something temporary using the state funds to just use those county funds and do the whole project.
And with that corner in 1600 west, are we putting the road back as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have one more question. So I really appreciate that, like, you took our priorities and ran with them. And that you've been able to find funding for it. Are there other projects that would needed to have been done that have been sacrificed in order to make this happen?
That's a good question. I think the answer is always yes. As far as new sidewalks go, and I think I'll answer that in two parts. Yes and no. I think with what we've focused on here, we've tried to focus around the school related areas with the two new schools that were built and some of the related kind of surrounding areas. We found these projects to be kind of the most critical. I think though, as we expand out into the other city or into the city around other schools that are existing or other existing subdivisions, there's always going to be more sidewalk projects that we can do that I think can be prioritized under this, but probably were sacrificed to kind of fulfill what we're looking here for these new schools.
Okay.
Any more sidewalk questions?
Doesn't look like it.
All right. So the third priority included exploring and developing parking plans and possible permanent areas in Slate Canyon and Joaquin. So the council spent quite a bit of time on this, both legislatively and through an appropriation, and developed a plan with the assistance of parking enforcement for Slate Canyon. The council appropriated funds for signage and for the rest of FY24, and then the position funding was allocated in FY25. So the council used general funds of approximately $28,000 to fund the signage and the fulfillment of moving a part-time employee to a full-time, and then the full-time was subsequently included in the FY25 budget. So staff continues to look at the possibility of parking permits or different parking changes in the Joaquin area. And so that continues to be a legislative priority that we're working on. But really, yes.
Okay, an update on the Joaquin parking situation. Spoke with the issue sponsors for that, and we're going to meet with Vern and Sandy and kind of just discuss safety and traffic, safe people's car, pedestrian any safety concerns. In the Joaquin neighborhood, we identified a couple streets, and then they also identified some streets they have concerns about. So we're just looking at this from a more holistic standpoint on what can be improved in Joaquin, and if that results in a parking program or plan, if that's what Vern and Sandy think would be best, then we'll go that route. But if not, and I know Public Works already has some plans and things budgeted for that area to improve streets there and street safety. So we're just kind of looking at what the administration already has going there and taking their recommendations and then seeing what comes from that. So not necessarily a parking solution, but if that's what the problems, that's the best solution for the problems we identified, then we'll go that route. But just a heads up on that.
And just to touch on Slate Canyon, I know there's been discussed extensively. There's been a lot of community feedback, neighborhood feedback, and not to beat a dead horse, but any
Go ahead.
any additional feedback that you all have received, I think and I don't want to speak for Sandy, but the interactions that we've had with parking and with Sandy and her staff is that things are going well. There are obviously some residents that are unhappy. There are others that are ecstatic. We will probably never make everyone happy. But overall, they feel that things are going well. Just wondered if there's any additional feedback that you've received from constituents.
Well, we don't have to get into the weeds on it. I think I sent an email to the council just asking, I just didn't know what the staff was planning. Are we gonna have a discussion about assessing it and talking about whether or not a parking permit program is a better alternative? Only because that's some of the citizens that I've been corresponding with, is their hope and expectation is that we were gonna look at that after some period of time, looking at how well the ban had worked. So I'm just wondering what the plan is in terms of the timing on that. Hello.
She had.
George, we can definitely, from council staff, we can look at anything that you guys would like to come back and look at that. As far as like the goals and if a permit is what we want to push to, that's just based off the goals that the council identifies for the parking regulations in the first place. Based off the goals that we had set when we initially did this Lake Canyon parking area, based on Sandy and her staff's assessment. They didn't suggest doing a permit area. They suggested doing the overnight based on the goals that we set, because that would be more effective. But if we want to assess that now that we've done it and listen, and based on some of the feedback we're getting, if we want to change kind of how we go about achieving those goals or changing the goals themselves, then we can definitely do that.
So I just need to know specifically, I have no opinion as to what the right thing to do is.
Yeah.
I just have felt an obligation to the citizens to say, because what I said, at least, and I thought we kind of, most of us felt like the ban was the preferred option. Obviously, that's what we voted for, but you know, it seemed like they had a reasonable expectation that if for some reasons it wasn't working as well, and they started, of course, immediately started asking for the parking permit instead.
Yeah.
And I kept saying, well, we'll look at it at a later point. So I'm just feeling a little bit of an obligation to make sure that they see us having a public discussion about it and assessing how it's doing. And if we decide we just want to keep it as is, that's fine.
Okay.
At least I can feel like we did our due diligence. But
Yeah,
Let's just do an update. in a
Yeah,
work
we
meeting.
can bring that back to a work meeting. That's no
Okay.
problem there.
do I need to make a co-sponsored request for that, or is that just?
I think this counts.
Yeah.
There's
Okay.
like true speak to that, so there's two. Yeah, we can do that, and I'll get in contact with you just on if there's certain things you
Okay.
want us to touch on for that, so I'll send you an email.
Thank you.
And I think mainly we want to hear from Sandy and her team.
Yeah.
Any questions? Anything else?
Related to this is as we had these conversations, we learned that we have vastly different fees for our other parking permit programs throughout the city. Is that part of what's going to come back to us on our reassessment of fees?
Yes, so that was included in the fee update.
Okay, because if, if the cost of administering a fee area really should be, I don't know, $200 per residence, and we're charging between 15 and 100, not only are we charging vastly different amount of for different areas, which is inherently unfair, where we're not recouping the cost of the programs that benefit those residents. Okay, that was all. It was tangential.
No, that's great. Sandy's ears must have been burning. She ran down here.
Upstairs.
Oh, perfect. Well, I saw you come in. I don't know if you wanted to chime in. I don't want to put you on the spot, but any feedback from your staff on how things are going in Slate Canyon?
Slate Canyon, it seems to be going well. Kind of. Our thought is perhaps letting it over the year so we can go through summer and winter to see how this parking management program went. And then again, maybe readdress it for the permit. Again, we're seeing a significant improvement on enforcement, citations written there, and calls for service through Paul and or through the 311 system. So we're feeling again very positive about it. We do get the request for the permits. So again, we're more than willing to look at that and assess maybe if we want to allow more or parking on the street.
When is the Wednesday morning?
May. We went on about Memorial Day.
So we've seen some interest by some residents to extend it further west. You see a need in extending it further west?
We're seeing that. I've seen into those cul-de-sacs. Again, we're not. But I think as we see development, we're going to see a need for it. So if we, again, our thought is if we're going to reassess the whole situation, we'd like to look at kind of the plans there so we can just do it all in one movement. And those cul-de-sacs, is that west or south? To me, that's south and west. Those cul-de-sacs down in there, they are requesting that we look at the parking management in them as well.
Thanks, Sandy.
Any other questions? Thanks, Sandy.
Thank you.
All right. We are flying through this. So the fourth priority was regarding employee talent retention. So the budget priority was to fund employee merit increases, cost of living increases, and market study increases. This was also included in the current fiscal year budget. But just to give you an idea of the cost, roughly $3 million is the cost to fund that. That's not insignificant. Scott and I had a lengthy conversation about this earlier, and it's this fine balance of what feels kind of like an arms race in recruiting and retaining talent within the city. And you have, dozens of other entities throughout the state that are looking to do the same thing. So I know it is a fine balance, but something that was included in the priorities and was funded, but does have a significant fiscal impact on the budget each year. So, any questions related to this?
Just curious, Justin, was the goal 3% COLA and then funding allowed for 4%? Or was there no specific goal related to COLA?
I don't believe there was a specific goal related to the COLA, but that was what was recommended in the tentative budget. Any other questions?
Well, while it wasn't necessarily exactly on this, I liked the presentation that we just had about the language incentive for our police officers. I think that actually goes along with this employee talent retention and helping to encourage and reward our employees for skills that help them serve our community better. And so where the administration has come to us with other things like that through the year, I think that's been consistent with this goal, and I've been appreciative of it.
Anything else? All right, we're on the last one with Lion. So the last goal included efficient delivery of current and valued Provo city services projects and programs. You know, there's lots of different ways to try to measure this, but really included this as passing a balanced budget for the year. And at least from what I've seen as far as citizen feedback and talked at length with Scott about this, have not seen much, if any, feedback from citizens regarding any kind of reduction in services, although it was a tough budget year. I mean, there was really a lot of work that departments in the administration went through to balance the budget, even though revenue came in lower than anticipated or expected, but to still provide those services to our citizens. So really, I think big kudos to the administration for bringing that forward. I don't know, any questions, comments, complaints? All right. Well, that was it for the follow-up from FY25.
Okay, thanks, Justin.
Do you want to jump right into the next one, or?
A discussion regarding council priorities for the fiscal year 2026.
All right. So I feel like we made quite a bit of changes last year as far as narrowing budget priorities and really honing in and focusing on specific issues that could be recommended to the administration, and then were subsequently included in the FY25 budget. I think this is a great opportunity to have that discussion again. And I'll give that with a caveat. So I feel like sometimes we have these meetings and we feel obligated to make a decision quickly. And there is some sense of urgency with the administration starting to build out the budget. But I also think it's worth taking some time to really narrow down those priorities and what is important. While at the same time, sometimes, well, I shouldn't say that. There may not be any specific priorities, and that's I don't want. It's not necessarily a bad thing. So I'll just give that as a caveat for kind of beginning the discussion. So over the past year or so, council staff has compiled a list of potential priorities that the council has either brought up or discussed in work council meetings, that we may have had discussions about individually or collectively. And we provided you that list, and we'll go through those in a little more detail here. But really, it's meant to serve as a starting point for priorities. I hope that if there are additional priorities that you have thought of or that you feel welcome or prepared to bring those up and really go in depth. I would also say, although we're talking specifically about budget priorities, there may be and likely will be legislative priorities that'll come up. And I think that's a good thing. I think the way that you adopted priorities last year as kind of these overarching goals that really helped frame the year in what you were interested in doing legislatively, and then creating kind of this sub bullet of a specific budget priority, help balance that and give direction to staff on what was important to you all that we can work on legislatively, but also give direction to the administration on what you want to see in the budget. So that's how we've kind of set up and framed this discussion. But if you have any other questions, we'll jump right into it. So we've broken these topics up into 6 categories. A number of them correlate or correspond with budget priorities that you adopted last year. And so the first topic that we had put forward was increasing homeowner occupancy through a balance of home types throughout the city. That was, easily the council's #1 priority. It's been reiterated through your work legislatively and through the budget. It was something that we really took to heart through the housing summit, and wanted to really use this time to see if that is a continued priority. I can assume that it is, but it'd be great to hear from you all and see if there are any specific thoughts you have on owner occupancy. We put together a couple of bullet points on what could specifically be done through the budget. Last year, using funds to move forward with the zoning update was one thing, but a couple of topics that have come up in the last year or so included budgeting a specific dollar amount towards land acquisition. That's something that the city has really worked in partnership with the Housing Authority and the Land Trust on using already owned city land through the parcel out on the west side, and additional city-owned parcels that are going through the annexation process right now near Provo High. But this may be something that you'd like to look into. It's not land acquisition is not
with our budgets, we're not gonna get that specific, right? Aren't we just gonna, we're gonna have to go through it the year and see, what our options are. Like, we've used some of these things already and
Sure.
we'll use them again. But I don't believe we need to get into the nitty-gritty as we make these budget priorities, right?
Well, unless we wanted to set up a special account or fund for property acquisition.
Right, but we're not gonna settle that in this meeting, or,
But if we say that's a priority, then
but we'll still need to do a work meeting on it and figure that out. Like, I just don't. It'll take way too long to go through even 3 priorities getting nitty-gritty in order to have this in time for the administration. Like, we've just never done it in the past. It's completely
Yeah.
different if we're gonna do that.
I'm confused. So I thought we were asking ourselves if you're asking us if we want to make that a priority, but I'm confused with.
Yeah, well, the priority would be increase homeowner occupancy through increasing homeowner occupancy. That would be a priority.
Mhm.
If we're gonna get into the specifics on how we're gonna do it and
Yeah,
get
so
into that and make up funds, that's gonna take
sure.
us months.
And can go as deep or as broad as you'd like to. The thought was, if the overarching goal is still increasing owner occupancy, is there something budget specific that you would like to see included in the budget?
So are you talking about maybe something like, one of the things I'd like to see, I would vote for, yes, let's keep this as a #1 priority. I would also suggest that we take a look at funding for helping the administration actually rethinking the whole process of how we ascertain homeownership, especially as it applies to ADUs and rentals and RDLs and all those things. We've talked about that a lot. that may also be a budget issue where it just takes more money to like totally reimagine it than just have Scott and his team come up with a new process. So I don't think would need to come up with a dollar figure, but we might want to say, yeah, let's do everything we can so that the administration can really get after this in terms of, because if we could solve that, if we actually had some of the things we've imagined, man, this home ownership goes way up. I think it has a big impact.
Yeah, because what I've heard several council members say is that we're not comfortable expanding ADUs, which can increase homeowner occupancy because we don't have confidence in our enforcement.
Yeah.
And so if what we were doing is saying, we want the administration to come back to us with possible new ways of, data scraping and things like that, and a plan to use that data with enforcement officers so that we have confidence that ADUs are being occupied correctly. Then we as a council may be willing to expand ADUs, and that could create more opportunities for homeowner occupation throughout the city. And that seems like a very reasonable budget thing. And just like last year where we said we want to do the zoning rewrite, not knowing exactly how much it would be, we had, kind of a ballpark. It would be a similar thing here, right? To explore, perhaps do an RFP for this kind of, I don't know, like AI augmented database scraping.
Yeah, and I know that some of that's already going on. I would just add my voice to say, and I would be glad to help put resources behind it. So that it's not just rearranging the deck, chairs on the deck. It might be a whole new deck we need. And so, again, not getting into the amount, but just communicating the priority. Because I think if we could solve that, that goes so far to helping us with a whole cascade of issues. You covered several of them.
Right. And I mean, that could be put into enforcement or administration staffing as a different priority, but we would be looking at it as a way to give us confidence for this homeowner occupation portion.
Like an increasing homeowner occupancy through more vigilant enforcement and like something that works.
Yeah, it's just that I have a hard time imagining us doing more of the same.
Right.
I think we all feel like, no, we actually need to be doing something different. But I don't want to be asking things in administration they don't have the resources to do. So maybe it's just a matter of communicating that and saying, so if we were to like totally reimagine it for like the next century, what would that be? I'd support something.
George?
So maybe just to clarify my own confusion between what Justin and Patrice were saying. So it sounds like you're adding another bullet point here, which I would also second and support. I didn't think you were asking us for the specific dollar amounts now. I thought you were asking us
For the bullets.
whether or not we wanted these bullets, right?
Yes.
So, because there may be a specific dollar amount that we then have to contemplate about that.
Yes.
I just want to go to the bullet point number one. I don't know what that dollar amount is either, but for me, that's a big priority. I think we loved the project we did last year.
Yeah.
I'm a little confused after the RDA training we just got that there's a way in which we can do some of this through RDA that may or may not involve budget. I don't know. I didn't quite capture all of what they were explaining when they talked about those housing projects in Salt Lake that had those different levels of AMI. I'm very attracted to that. I'd like to see if we can get creative that way. But I would say if we're serious about, and I'm as serious, I think, as everyone else on this council is about increasing homeowner occupancy, we have to provide housing types at different price points, which maybe is a little more specific than what it says. It says through a balance of home types. But I think we're talking about price points, more specifically, right? Because otherwise we could have, there are condos in Salt Lake that are selling for $3 million. I just found out about,
Not because someone was trying to sell it to me, I wasn't in the market, but.
Did you buy it?
No, but I mean, so you can have different housing types that are still outside of the range of what we're trying to do to increase homeowner occupancy, so. I think, I don't know if we want to add that as a qualifier to what we're saying, we're looking at different price points, and I think both point number one is a great way to do it. I just don't know if there's a spot of land out there right now that's just waiting for us to invest in as a city and make something like that happen, because I talked to a couple of police officers who were very excited about it. I think Becky said something similar earlier, but they immediately found out there were so few of them available. It wasn't as promising as maybe at first glance. And so it would be nice to see us be able to provide housing projects for different income levels in the city. Anyway, I'm just expressing my support for that. I think
I like that.
I don't know what the dollar amount is, but
I'm with you.
but I mean, if we express that as a priority, and we would probably have to have, as Katrice was saying, a work session to hammer out exactly what that looks like and see if we have some land that we can look at.
Well, we're doing the big west, we have a big west side one, obviously the one looking at, that's a couple hundred.
On that one already, right?
It's
Well-
77.
But land acquisition, like, wouldn't it be cool if we could buy Ralph? Right,
Yeah.
to have funds for that.
I mean, the amount of RDA for those Salt Lake structures was tens of millions of dollars, we don't have that. So I mean, it's not really comparable.
But if we started
Small.
seeding a fund like that,
Or if we seed a nonprofit who can,
Or however it's done, I like the idea. Let's do another, something like that this year. I think most of us would support that. I would put the other one, number one. 'Cause I also think there are some priorities here. I would actually put let's get owner occupancy known and enforced. I put that as number one. I like number two. I don't know about that renovation program. I'm not even sure what that is, but
I was gonna ask,
Oh,
what
I
is
know about
that?
that one.
What does
Well,
that mean?
that was something that we did years ago, right? And that was an active program in our neighborhood. Was it using CBDG funds or something?
I believe so.
Where they would buy up these really like sad, neglected little houses and do a little renovation, and then they were for sale to people. You had to live in that house for a certain period of time. You couldn't rent it out or alienate yourself from it for a period. And so there's several houses in my neighborhood that have gone through that program. It's been, 15 years, but they're still nice, tidy little houses. And they've gone from one set of homeowner occupants to another. So they've
do they
remained.
make a grant or a loan? Or all the above?
Well, it was a nonprofit
it was
that
a
came
partnership
in.
between a nonprofit and banks and the city. So the banks were involved. But
But the
all the
nonprofit got
all the
fried.
deeds were wiped out, so they aren't deed restricted anymore.
Yeah.
But the nonprofit got fried in that whole 2008 market crash. And so if we did it, we'd have to
start the program again and find a new partner.
Mhm.
But it was a really effective way of kind of stabilizing
The
these
downtown
neighborhoods that were sliding. Because when you have, one house on a block that gets fixed up and nicer, then the neighbors are like, well, I'm gonna clean up a little bit too. It had a really good cascading effect. And I would love to see a program like that tried again under our new market conditions.
Does it have to be RDA designated?
No. No, and with federal funds, then it's more likely that we'd be able to do it in those CBDG areas. So those lower income ones. But honestly, those are the areas where you've got the houses that you could buy for a more reasonable amount and help with the renovation. And I really liked that because, the governor's not really doing a lot to help with renovation of existing housing stock or helping first-time home buyers get into that. But this would be a program where we as a city could say, most of our housing is built out, and so we want to reinvest in these little neighborhoods.
Okay.
Which I did find someone up in the Tip neighborhood that said that they have houses that had done this program 20 years ago, and they're still homeowner occupied 20 years. And it's helped stabilize those neighborhoods, but from what I was told, they brought in the neighborhood program and they said, okay, which parts of your area are really in need of this? Which ones are kind of falling apart and in need of this? And so those are the ones that they bought as they became available and renovated and sold them. I think it was what, a 5-year age restriction that they had to live in them.
Yeah.
And a lot of them just kept living.
Yeah, I think they also had help with their loans, like a down payment.
That's what.
Down payment
loan.
assistance, yeah.
Yeah,
Well, the
so it was a
loan
really
interest.
multi-pronged thing. But for helping existing neighborhoods, it's great. There were other home renovation programs that we had to help like re-roof, paint. We did a couple of paint your heart out projects where, I mean, there was one day where we painted 3 houses. Or it was like 2 days. So one day we did all of this prep work as a whole neighborhood, and the other day we did the painting, pulling in multiple church stake units to get the volunteers. Wonderful community building things, and you have homes that are refreshed and
And they also use those for some of their matching grants for some of those neighborhoods, the
Mhm.
service hours and.
Yeah.
Even some of the paint that was donated, they would put those towards their matching grants
Yeah.
to get other things in the neighborhood.
yeah. So, and I don't know what amount we would want to do to that, and it would probably be appropriate to talk to Melissa McNally about this and see if there is a nonprofit partner who would be interested in trying to bring a program like that back, or a similar program, right? Not exactly what we had before.
And in Franklin, some of those homes were purchased by teachers that still work at Franklin, right? So I know that's one thing that the school, well, one of the school board members has asked to try to get back to help these programs within these neighborhoods, these struggling neighborhoods.
Do we have any idea if I like that program, I'm supportive. Do we have any idea if the developments that have been approved that are just lying fallow right now have any kind of budgetary implications? I mean, I'm just wondering if there's anything the city can do to move those along, because it seems like that really helps us a lot with our goal, because we've approved a lot of single family detached homes that just haven't been built yet. Or is that entirely out of our hands?
Mostly apartments.
And apartments, yeah, but I'm just saying for owner occupancy.
Well, we approve more apartments every year than single family homes, right? I mean, what was it, like
11 to 1.
11 to 1? So there's 11 apartment units to 1.
But I'm aware of apartments being held up. I'm not aware of single family.
I am. There's that
Oh,
one
I
that
thought there
was
was-
bankrupt down by.
Yeah, there's a couple of big ones on the west side that haven't gone
No,
forward.
they're not big. They're small.
Like how big?
90 units,
90 units? Wow, that's pretty big for a single family.
not compared to the one that we just passed not too long ago. That one was huge. That one's a
Well,
lot bigger.
I'm just saying, is there anything that we can do to move those along? I don't know
This
how many
particular
there are.
one was a bankrupted
Most of
one.
them are all finance things. We're not gonna get it.
Yeah,
We're not gonna get it.
I just read an
financed.
article today that said that that the number of spec homes nationwide has increased. I saw a chart, it was pretty drastic. Basically meaning that a lot of that has to do with interest rates, which apartments, you would think, well, what does that have to do with interest rates? It's the builder's ability to finance their project is impacted by interest rates as well. So I think the interest rate issues are.
Are any projects still being held up because of lack of infrastructure capacity?
That's probably a better question, something like.
So-
What about that one on 1600 West, just right south of 1150 South? Is that one held up with the sewer? That one was approved a few years ago. Dave Harding was on that map. Yeah,
To the mic, my friend.
because I know that one was approved, but I'm wondering if that one's held up because of sewer issues.
Yes, there's, I would say, That's dead.
Oh, well, that's just not how it works, is it?
Okay. Yeah, answer your question, there are a lot of projects that are waiting for infrastructure, in my opinion, move forward. Now, there may also be the interest rate is part of that as well. But, yeah, on the west side, there's several projects that I'm aware of, and I don't know the reason why they might have stalled, whether it's because of interest rate or because they're waiting for the city or other development. Put some of that infrastructure. For the most part, the city does not put that infrastructure in, the developer does that. So sometimes this guy may leapfrog somebody else, and so that may stall the project as well. That answer your question, right?
I think that's more of what George was asking is.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just, so is there anything we could do to move that forward?
You give me all the money.
Give you
I'll
money.
spend it. I'll put it in the
Yeah.
ground.
I mean, that's what we're
So-
waiting on.
Yeah, and so you gotta remember, like, we put the sewer line in out to the high school. That's basically the backbone. We're just waiting for people to tie into that. And it's so far removed from everything else. Some of this development that we see on Lakeview Parkway that you guys just approved, recently, I think we approved that one, where we're waiting for the improvements to be put in. We just saw another development just this week to the side of that coming in. The question was asked, are the two developers working together? So I think we can get some of this development moving forward in this situation without the city putting the funding out there. That's actually your question. So,
Yeah, I mean, I would be supportive of trying to get a better grasp of exactly which developments are being held up by infrastructure and then what options we have to try to help overcome those issues.
I'll tell you what, I just saw an email today up by the high school, just to the east of there towards Geneva Road. There are that part of the city, we're waiting for water infrastructure, not sewer in this case, but water. Get over there just to help with the flow. We have a plan for a water line coming down 1730 west, crossing the freeway. But here again, prices have gone up, we're slowed down as far as how fast we can put these improvements in. But that would speed up, in this particular developer's question just today, that would help speed that up. Is it a large project? No, I'm gonna say it's probably 30 homes, probably in this particular developer that's asking the question. So,
My other question is that secondary trunk line. How far out are we on that? And is that gonna hold up any development?
which trunk line are you
The
talking about?
parallel trunk line?
Parallel trunk line, we've kind of postponed that because we've been very creative in trying to increase the capacity on the 36. Plus, if you remember the lift station, we kind of bypassed a lot of that 36. So we kind of helped solve some of the trouble spots that we have.
So it's not
Yeah.
necessarily critical like it was before.
It's still critical. It's not, I would say, eminent as far as moving it forward as fast as we thought we need. We still need it. I don't want to take that and totally say it's still needed, but we're just being creative. We're doing some advanced type cleaning that is helping our capacity on our sewer lines and stuff like that. Okay.
So Councilor Hanley, I don't know if this will answer your question, but the city's got roughly 1,400 entitled units that haven't been built. And so there was a question about single family there. Councilor McKay's right. The majority are multifamily. It's about 1,000 units. There's about 300 single family detached that are entitled and about 100 single family attached. Of those, development services, public works, they look at these applications as they come in, and for the most part, these have sufficient infrastructure. There's a fairly large project that the council did approve, Buckley Draw, that does have some infrastructure needs. So that's 110 single family units. They're probably going to come to the council sooner or later to ask for some potential help in that area. But if that gives you an idea of what's kind of currently out there, most of them have sufficient infrastructure. I think to Councilor Hogan's point, there's, they're also looking at this from a financial perspective of they've got the units entitled, but what are they paying to finance these, as far as their interest rates. So I think a lot of factors there. One thing that I feel like has come up recently in a number of projects is proposals that have come before the council that would require an increase in density, but there's not sufficient infrastructure there. And I don't know if that's something that the council would be interested in looking more into, an increase in density in certain areas where you feel appropriate, and working through Public Works to see what would be appropriate upsizing in order to allow for those units or homes to be built. Public Works does a great job of planning infrastructure based off of our general and neighborhood plans. But then when property owners come forward and propose an increase in density, it either takes away from what is planned around, or it's not viable. So if there is interest there, that is another possible topic.
Justin, on that spreadsheet that you just displayed, what is the DA designation?
Development agreement.
Travis, what would?
I think I do. I don't like the idea of kind of making short-term decision of like blowing up the plans that we have for the city and kind of, we're going to have this density here, this density. I like the idea of kind of keeping that, but is there a way that we can remove some hurdles or log jams? If it's kind of a chicken and the egg thing, like, oh, well, if this project were affordable, then we would build the infrastructure and build the project, but it's not affordable. And, because of the infrastructure costs, could we like help build the infrastructure and then recoup the costs on the back end or something? Is there some creative way to kind of remove those hurdles and yet not just give it away and cover those costs?
Yeah.
I guess I'm totally outside of my realm here. I don't know. And so I would defer to, the city, I guess, on what sort of creative options there are. But, are other cities doing things like that, like putting in the infrastructure and then recouping that on the back end? I don't know. Is there a way we can help kind of grease the wheels here, so to speak?
Well, isn't that kind of what they do, Gary? Probably like that 1100 West project that we approved, they stick it in and then people that are going to develop on that end, don't they have to pay them back a certain portion of whatever infrastructure they put in for like the next 15 years? And that kind of the way it goes.
I don't know how it works. I
think you're making a reference to a pioneering agreement.
Yeah.
And the way that pioneering agreement is, they don't pay, the city is not involved to start, so it's certainly the developer that maybe is next door, he would be reimbursed by the first developer, but I think there's a time frame. I think it's 10 years that agreement's in place. After 10 years, all bets are off, I think. But the city's not the middleman or part of that.
I guess I don't know if we need motions or whatever you're looking for, but I would love to get a grasp on what we think as far as projects that are being held up simply because of things like infrastructure, as opposed to the developer's just not going to do it until interest rates go down, right? And that might be hard to gauge. You might have to call all these developers and say, hey, what's holding your project up? Is there any way we could help? Other than just give you more density, right? Which is what they always want. So get a grasp on that, and then get a grasp on what options we have to help kind of facilitate, if there's things we can do on our end. So I would appreciate having a better grasp on those two.
And if there's 30 houses that could be
I think
built
30
sooner
houses,
than
there's
later,
30 houses.
I'd like to see it happen.
Yeah. No matter how small a project in my mind. I mean, start with the biggest ones, of course. I'm not dictating what you guys need to do here. I'm stating for the broader group that I would love to see that if there's support for it.
Do we know what the timeline is for the station area plan, when that's going to be done?
That I don't know.
Because with that one, we're looking at increasing density along this transportation corridor. And because that would be a new projected increase in density, I don't think that is already accounted for in the long-term plans for upgrades in water and sewer. Is that correct, Gary?
Yes, we're on the same channel here. Yes, I'm gonna say yes.
So the sooner we know what that station area plan is and the areas that will be designated for higher density, the sooner they'll know that they need to update their infrastructure replacement, expansion, improvement plans to accommodate that. And so us being a little bit more expeditious on getting those plans done will help them with their plans. That will then talk to the developers and say, these are areas where we know we need more density. And even that we will not have increased the capacity, but we'll plan for the increase in capacity. That makes sense. But that's kind of a more long-term thing that we need to be thinking about and realizing that we're going to change. Is if I understand it right, your plans for sewer and everything have already taken into account the future land use in the general plan and the neighborhood plans. Is that correct?
That's correct. And if we change the plan, as we're talking about here, that's why we redo our master plan every 3 to 5 years, is to keep up with that plan. And then that plan tells us we have a problem in this location and we need to upgrade or upsize that line or replace it or add more capacity, however we can do that. So that's why we take those plans and try to keep our master plan updated as quickly and as often as possible to help get these areas. So is this the direction you want?
Yeah, well, and I'm just thinking about the Northeast Neighborhood Plan that we just passed. Did that plan with its, little more density along the university corridor, did that require you to change yours or will it?
Yes, it is going to require us to change our master plan.
So we've already indicated through adopting that plan that there's going to be higher density there. And this is a place where if a developer came in right now and said, okay, you indicated you want this, our public works would be able to say, we're not quite ready for that yet. So far, we've been really careful about avoiding this kind of logjam, but we need to be aware of where changing our plans, then we can create those. Okay, all right. I think I understand the situation on that. I'm glad that so far we haven't been creating a lot of problems in this way. And that Public Works is looking at our future land use maps so that we'll be able to avoid these. Because this is a way that it feels like developers or legislators like to scapegoat cities and say we're the problem for the lack of development. But that's really not the case here in Provo. That's not our problem. We have other problems, but not this one. Okay.
Could I make a simple request that we change the wording slightly on the green line and just say increase homeowner occupancy through a balance of home types and price points throughout the city? I don't know if that matters a whole lot to anybody, but I just feel like it's more specific about what we're trying.
Makes sense.
Got it changed already.
You're saying
So-
you could have a $3 million condo.
Right. I mean, it doesn't necessarily solve the problem. Yeah.
I would also, just to state the obvious, I like the idea of giving lots of ideas. And asking the city to go chase a lot of ideas is no ideas. I'd say let's chase one idea all the way through. One idea, and that one idea is around owner occupancy and in terms of the enforcement of owner occupancy and reimagining. These are all like 3 to 5x ideas. To me, that's a 100x idea. And so if we put all the wood behind that arrow and then have other good things that we pursue as they come up, I think that would make sense. So I would hate to just give a list of here's stuff. I'd like to say there's one thing and then a lot of other good things to blend in as they come up.
Well, I like that idea. There's some things that Melissa McNally's programs do every single year with those CDBG funds.
Yeah.
And so to give just one blanket one, I think we can
I wasn't
also,
saying do away with these. I was just saying, let's make it clear that these are 5x ideas. The other one's 100x. In terms of priority, let's just be clear about the big one, because what we're asking the city to do is come back with a plan. And instead of doing 6 things a little bit, let's do one thing all the way all the way through, and then let's do these other things as we can fit them in.
We've gotten in trouble in the past because we do like 10 priorities, with 5 different
Yeah,
bullet
yeah.
points. It's utterly useless.
Well,
And-
So I'm not
I'm
taking away.
okay.
Last year was one of the first years that we finally did like literally just 5 very simple bullet point, like priorities. And I think that's the best thing to get an end result. The last 2 years have been pretty good. But
And I don't think we need to rank our priorities right now. Right now, we're kind of discussing, and we're only on like one topic.
One really big topic.
One big topic, absolutely. But I think it's probably useful to have the whole conversation about these different possibilities for priorities and then start to rank them.
That's fair.
Because otherwise we foreclose our conversation. I will say that while I want us to increase opportunities for homeowner occupants within our city, I've been discouraged by how we've used that priority to shut down otherwise really good projects that are more rental heavy. We have a huge need for good rental units in our city as well. A lot of people in our city are not in a position to buy a home, and even the incentives or the modest things that we're able to do doesn't change that. And if our priority is too narrow just on that small segment of our population who could be homeowners, we are not serving the vast majority of the people who live here right now. And I think we may have artificially narrowed ourselves too much, and we're hurting a lot of our constituents because of it. So that's the only hesitation that's come to me as I've seen how we've implemented this priority over the last year. Yeah.
Sorry, my response to that would be, it's always about balance, right? It's always about balance. Because I don't think we want a Provo that has only for sale housing. I don't think anyone on council is saying everything has to be for sale. Let's kick out all the renters. I also don't think anyone on the council would say, let's only have rentals. What we're looking for is a balance. And I think what we're acknowledging is that the balance, from my perspective, has gone out of whack. 60-40 is simply out of balance. And so our immediate focus is simply to get it back into balance. And that's probably something more 60-40 the other way. So to me, it's not we're neglecting anyone. I think what we're doing is we're serving a better balance of the products and price points that are needed.
Yeah.
Not that we're saying it should be either, or. I can't imagine anyone saying it should be either or. So the question then is balance. And what you would hear from me is, I think we're out of balance. So let's do everything we can to balance, including taking short-term things last year, maybe this year, to help correct that.
Yeah. Yeah, I just was really impressed with the sheet our staff put together for our housing summit, especially that page where it talked about the demographics of Provo. You know, most of the people who live here are young. They're in that kind of young single age group where they have very young families. And because of the particular mix of the demographics of our community with the 2 universities here and everything, it may be that a 50-50 balance, or that a balance that is more homeowner occupied, is just not appropriate with our demographics. I don't want to be trying to force a model that's really good into a place where it doesn't quite fit, if that makes sense, because it just won't work, right? We'd be pushing against market forces and demographics, and try as we might, whatever resources we put into it, it would still ultimately fail because it's not the right solution for the conditions that we have.
I think there's a real chance that the 60-40 issue, I mean, I don't think there's agreement on the council on that. At least I don't agree that that percentage is as problematic as it sounds because of the fact that we have that huge student population. I mean, I've looked at the numbers a couple of times, and And when you take out our student population, we get much closer to 60-40 the other way. That being said, I think the real issue is that 40% is going to go down.
Yeah.
Our home occupancy rate is going to go below 40% if we can't keep up with the housing types that people need at the price points they need them at. So, I mean, maybe we get to 50. I don't think we're going to get there, frankly, but I'm fully in support of protecting and increasing opportunities for owner occupancy. I'm 100% behind that. I don't think it's fruitful to say that it has to be a certain percentage, because I don't think we've thought that through carefully enough. And I think when we make decisions about housing as a council, maybe a legislative priority that comes out of this discussion is that we get really clear. I mean, we were kind of talking about this just the other day, that we needed to talk about it some more, is figure out what can we agree on as a council that are the criteria that we're going to bring to bear when we're looking at different proposals, so that it doesn't feel like, we're constantly doing a tug of war between, we don't like this kind, or we've got to figure out what the criteria are for what's appropriate where in the city, and where do we need it, and why do we need it, and which demographic is going to be helped by this project, and does that balance well with the other kinds of things that we're proposing or approving. I mean, to my mind, after 7 years on the council, this is the hardest thing the council does. And we still haven't figured out how to do it right. So it's
Still another year.
right. Yeah, but I mean, yeah, so I want to work on this with everybody here. Anyway, that's probably more said.
To kind of go off of that, to get more into the legislative priorities, I think for a long time we've looked at Provo as compared to our neighboring cities, or to Utah County, or to the state, which is an indicator in a way. But what we have started to do as council staff is look at our comparison to other similarly sized cities with large universities to see what that balance looks like. I think, we'd all love to see more owner occupancy, but what is realistic within the confines of having a university with tens of thousands of students, and what that does. And it's interesting to look at kind of these preliminary numbers we've looked at of, what do things look like in Ann Arbor, Michigan? What do things look like in, Fort Collins, Colorado, or Tempe, Arizona, where you've got large universities, large student populations. And it's so far interesting to see. Looking forward to sharing that with the council, but I think that ties into, setting expectations for what's realistic with both BYU and UVU right here. So.
Yeah. Well, and I think that makes sense. I think that would be, George, I think you raised a really good point. I think that would be a great discussion to have. And I also don't think that we're going to move it back to 50-50. My concern is that we go to 70-30, 80-20. I think there is some point where.
Let's hold the line.
And because I hear from neighbors who are losing neighborhoods, and they're losing community. That's my concern. And so I don't know what the right number is, but I do think it makes sense not just to talk in arbitrary numbers, but to really kind of think through where and how. And there may be some places where you say, you know what, as many apartments as you can, as high as you want, go. And other places where you say, no, this is actually a much more less more owner occupied, I should say, and it should deserve a different kind of mix. So I think that's a good discussion to have.
Yeah, because this area in North Joaquin, that's north of 500 North, south of campus, the neighborhood has already thrown up their hands about. Honestly, I would love to see that whole area redeveloped with very tall apartments, right? And not have any homeowner occupation requirement for that area, with the hopes that we could help concentrate more of those students into actually really good quality housing, because the housing that I lived in south of campus when I was a student was clearly hazardous, not a healthy place to live. I want our student tenants to have a good, healthy place to live. And I would want us as a council to be supportive of something like that. So I think it would make sense if we had a discussion where we designated some areas where like, we do not have any expectation of home or occupation in these particular areas or along this particular kind of corridor. Because we think that would serve the community best. And that way we can focus our resources to help hold that line for home and occupation in these other areas.
Agreed.
And so I think that that's an important discussion that we'll need to have so that we can actually achieve a good balance.
Yeah. I like it.
Thank you.
I've written
You
down
done for the
quite,
day?
no, not even close. I've written down quite a few, just to kind of give you an idea of where staff's thoughts were. We wanted to go through the exercise that we did last year, where you kind of rank these priorities. Today, if you feel like, or if you'd like time to think through these, to do that at a subsequent meeting so that we can kind of get a better idea. But I've taken notes on the additional and kind of edited priorities in these bullet points, and we'll bring those back. So just kind of an idea of where we're
I'd
going.
love to have a subsequent opportunity to like,
Yeah.
think about it for a while, talk about it
Yeah.
amongst ourselves, and then come back and say, let's rank them. And simplify so we don't give the administration 14 priorities.
All right. Anything else on this priority?
Nope.
All right. Can I make a selfish request? Can we take a quick break?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, we've been going for a while.
So selfish. Thank you.
Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
And kids who walk to BYU every day during the school season. So that's been great. And we found out, by the city looking into this, that just basic sidewalk maintenance, doing our $500,000 a year, it would take us 40 years to catch up, and by then they would fall apart. Right. So we know that, just that $500,000 seems like a lot of money to me, but we know that that's just far too modest to even maintain the sidewalks that we have. And so the only way to be able to build new ones, to make it safer for the schools, is to keep this as a top priority. I like that Public Works has found, all sorts of funds to do this. And we've been exploring, different ways that we could put additional funding into pedestrian safety. Those have been part of our conversations, like, would this be appropriate for TIF? Are there other ways that we can do it? We've even looked at doing kind of neighborhood impact fees if we really want a particular kind of infrastructure added to an area. And I expect that, as our Public Works department is going around and they're looking at these gaps, if they see an area where that sort of funding mechanism would be appropriate to address an immediate problem, I believe they would present that to us, and we would listen to it well. I really feel that pedestrian safety is a huge thing for mobility, for community safety, for a sense of community. Like, we have to be able to walk out of our houses to our neighbor's house, to our car, to where it is that we're going. And we are incredibly fortunate that we live in a city that years ago put sidewalks and park strips as a priority. It makes our city much more comfortable to live in. It increases our quality of life. And so I feel like our obligation is to help maintain that wonderful asset that we've been given, so that it doesn't just crumble into nothingness. So we have to keep investing in order to keep the benefits. Yay. Yay. Thank you. Move to my district.
All right. The next category was explore, develop plans for priority capital projects. These have come up a number of times, and I'll skip infrastructure needs. I feel like we talked about that at length in the housing item, but airport expansion has been something that has been discussed at length and is ongoing. I don't want to steal Isaac and Brian's thunder, but Utah County Tourism Tax Advisory Board met beginning of last month and recommended funding for proposed terminal expansion. That's got to go to the Board of County Commissioners still for approval, but That's funding of $76 million over 20 years. So a lot happening at the airport. Didn't know if there's anything specific that the council is looking for kind of in that area. I know the airport's got a master plan, updating that master plan, if that's something the council would like to see or look for. Kind of an ongoing project that's been part of the Mayor's Big Six. And now we've got a county entity stepping in to really help fund that priority. So may not be something that directly needs budgetary funding, but may or may not be something that the council would like to see as far as planning goes. So
I would just say, and if I'm speaking out of turn on behalf of other council members, but I think I've never sensed any opposition or concern about the airport. I think with the administration, you need to come back to us with some specific budget requests about it. We can evaluate it at that point, but it's clearly something we care about, have funded in the past, but obviously we prefer free money, as the mayor likes to put it. And so if there are other ways to fund things that don't involve the city, that's great, but I think we stand pretty ready to support. But I don't feel like I'm in any sort of position to say what it is we need or, want to fund, because that's not something we know as much about as you guys. So.
I'm gonna be contrary to that because I hear a lot of opposition to the airport where I'm at, a lot. And the one thing that does concern me that we did bring up in the public meeting is growing too fast. And we did bring up, is 10 gates even enough? Can we even expand after 10 gates? And I was just talking to Vern about my concern about extending the Lakeview Parkway, and I brought this up in the closed meeting, all the way up through Warren to University Parkway. I would like to see those things done as a part of this, so that it doesn't just all traffic, because all traffic's not going to go down the Lakeview Parkway. It's just not. If we extend the Lakeview Parkway all the way up in through Orem, I think that would be a great asset. And we were talking about that might take some of the pressure off of Center Street. Just some infrastructure. I'm worried about growing too fast. I'm worried about, okay, now we're at 10 gates and we still have so many planes that we don't know where to park them. Now what's going to happen next? And I'm sure the Hinckleys would appreciate me bringing this up too, because where is that going to go? How much more property is going to be needed? What does that mean for my farm? What does that mean for the farms all the way around there? Those are just all questions and concerns that Westside has. What does this growth mean for us? We're already seeing some of those little teeny planes that are flying over the Westside neighborhoods. Are we going to keep all these planes over the lake? What does that mean for us? And so I just kind of want to, whoa, let's try these next 3 gates, see how they work, and then 3 more. So I'm more hesitant. I'm more of a, let's do this little by little instead of all in for 10.
And I think we agree, Becky. We recognize the concerns of the West Provo community. We recognize the value that the airport brings to our city, the economic impact. Again, not speaking for the council, but we want to be aware of and sensitive to those needs and be measured in our approach. So I think we're all just watching for balance, that right balance. We're not going to ignore, and I don't think the administration.
I'm sorry if I implied otherwise, because I think those are really important concerns, and I've raised some of those myself, so I don't disagree with anything you said. I just was saying I don't know what the budget priority ask on our part would be at this point. I don't really feel like there's any. But if other council members have specific budget requests regarding the airport, certainly now's the time to make them. I just didn't see any. Thanks.
All right.
We're not ready to move on.
We're not moving yet. Someone else can speak? No. Well, I just want to weigh in that, yes, we need to do this in a very deliberate way, and we need to make sure that we do so responsibly. And again, it comes down to balance. We could come up with the money to expand the airport, or we can take advantage of, other funds to do that. Anytime we can take care of other funds, to me, that's an incentive that we should take advantage of. And we need to do it responsibly and that's why maybe it makes sense to have more discussion, to have, more involvement in terms of people, giving input. But I think this is a major economic driver for us. And so much of what we talk about is we don't have money to do stuff. All right, well, here's an opportunity. So we want the benefit, but we don't want the cost. And so I hear what you're saying loud and clear. And I am very for the airport. And making sure that we don't make it even more difficult to fund this because, again, this is such a gift. Most cities, would give their left arm and right arm and probably a leg or two in order to have this kind of opportunity. And we've got it right here and we're doing it well. We need to make sure it's balanced, but I think it would be wise for us to realize we may not get everything we want. Wow, this is just such a tremendous opportunity for us at the same time as a city.
So my question on the airport expansion is to the administration and maybe to Brian, and is that would we need to make the airport a special budget priority for the council this year, or is that already moving ahead without any action from us other than our general support that we've already expressed? Because if it turns out that what we need is, or what you need is for us to throw in like $5 million right now as a but-for condition, a necessary condition in order for other things to happen, that would be good information for us to know. Also, really, do we want Brian driving the snowplows? So.
Yeah, again, Justin.
Uh-oh.
I'll try to talk loud. So as far as the budget perspective goes, obviously, it's really hard to complain about the position we're in at the airport. Pretty incredible what's happened. If you look at what's happened the last 5 years, what Isaac and Mayor recently been able to do, almost $200 million of money that has impacted the Provo citizens. That's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
And I think that, correct, to your point, it's pretty hard to say no to that, right? And to Justin's point, the county, we're working with the county now on a $76 million donation, apparently, essentially, something they approached us. We thought we had our piece from the county. And so we're grateful that the county's come forward and said, hey, we recognize this as a benefit to the entire county. And so we're working through some of the details on that. It still leaves us short a little bit of what we need. But our intent is to go back to work and do exactly what we've done for the last 5 years and come up with that 15 to 25 million that we're short. You will see, however, as you have seen, requests for approval to accept a loan for interim financing. So much of this funding comes 3 years out, 4 years out. For example, MAG fund, we have a $16.9 million award from MAG, Mountain Land Association of Governments. It's not available until 2028. Well, that's 3 years from now, which makes it incredibly difficult to plan a construction project and keep up with its escalating costs. So I think you'll see on the agenda next week a request for accepting a loan or allowing their Capusi to enter into negotiations with UDOT for a state infrastructure bank loan that would allow us to move forward with construction on apron, And then once we get those funds from that, that loan gets paid off. So, anyway, I think you'll see more of that. In trying to make the cash flow for the project. But the funding is our intent, and Isaac and I worked pretty diligently on this, is that none of that comes from general fund or anything off the Provo City residents.
So other capital projects, I know we had that little corner by the Epic Sports Park that we want to have a commercial development on. Do you have an update on that? Is there anything that the council could do to help scoot that along a little faster? Yes.
We had initial interest, and then when the sport park opened, then it became really interesting to some people. So we're decided that we're going to go for a request for proposals for development in that area to be able to evaluate and do that. So it wasn't just one proposal, there were multiple interests. So to make sure we do a competitive format, we're going to go out for that. So that's in the works right now.
Because I really see the Epic Sports Park and the airport and this like little commercial development.
After the pickleball.
At the pickleball, but then, you know, a Walmart coming in at the other end of the road down there as like this lovely redevelopment along that corridor. And I'm hoping the more that we have along there, the more attractive it will be to be on that street instead of Center Street. You know, it'll just draw more of that flow. I'm hoping that can help with your neighborhood quality of life issues. But when I ride down there to the park or to the airport or something, really nice to stop and like get a drink at a 7-Eleven or something there. But that's moving along. You don't need council to give it another little shove.
No appropriation necessary for an RFP yet, but you've hit it exactly right. Just our combination of the regional sports park and the airport. And that was even before the announcement for Walmart, is the synergy in all this. What's going on along Lakeview Parkway is pretty amazing, and it's drawing a lot of interest, and it's drawing interest from people that pretty excited to have looking at the Provo and doing some really exciting things out on the west side.
Okay. Are we still looking at that as like the city still owns the land and maybe the buildings and then they rent them out?
I think that's something we can make a decision together later on. I will see what proposals come in. I think they know our priorities are to, you know, support and go for those type of things that support the amenities we already have out there or that are needed on the west side. And I think they will probably come with whether or not their plan comes with a purchase, sale, or land lease plan. But we've left both options open. And that's a great thing about RFPs versus a specific bid, in that we've got options and we've got negotiation that could be part of that. So we can all work together on that.
Did we already be shown that?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. My preference would be for holding on to the land and renting it out so you have that steady income, rather than just selling it off in one event.
Yeah, that sure helps in a self-sustaining operation like the Epic Sports Park. That could help in that and create some income and make sure that doesn't go on into any need of operation. That goal of self-sustainability that this council's made pretty clear.
Okay, who wants to fund a dog park?
I actually think we just need to bring the discussion back. And I don't know that we need to go right to funding dog parks. Again, it's so hard to come up with funding for that. I would suggest we have another discussion about how we accommodate people with dogs in our current parks.
I am not for that.
Well, I know some of you aren't, and I just think that's where it's more discussion.
Okay, well then it sounds like there's not support for funding a dog park. As a priority.
Perfect. Just a quick update on that from Parks. So they're putting together their master plan, their dog park master plan and implementation strategy. So they had an RFP that closed on October 25th. And so they went through consultant interviews in November. And they are working on selecting a consultant and working on their timeline for public engagement and a survey. But they expect that their final plan, they're targeting completion for May of 2025. So they're working on a plan.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Just
Well,
a
if they're already
little
doing
update.
it, then we don't have to push that.
Well, and maybe I'm by myself, but I would like, I think we need another solution besides just one dog park sometime in 2030. So I realize that's not the purpose here, but I'd like to have some discussion about what we might do with our current to accommodate that current plans.
Well,
I'll second on that.
the
but that-
proposal
we can do that
to
later.
possibly do dog hours at existing parks. I don't know if we know if there's a cost with that. I mean, I'm sure there would be signage if we would need to have some sort of additional enforcement or staffing to do a pilot project like that. So if you wanted to make that a priority to say, look, you know, we want to try this out as an interim thing while you're working for a more permanent solution. And it may be that it works great and we end up doing both, have dedicated dog parks and hours at other ones. But this is where we can communicate to the administration that it's really important to us, is if we are saying we want to put money for a pilot program for you to do that.
I would say, I mean, I'll just echo the support for solving the issue in the sense that if we only do dog parks, we're talking about a waiting period of quite a while for people who are owning dogs right now who need space and opportunities. And so if we're going in that direction, then we need to figure out what the finances are on that and what the timing is. But knowing how long that could take, I still think we need some sort of interim. I do not stop getting emails about this, so I don't feel like that the issue has been resolved to the citizen's satisfaction, and I'd like to figure out what the interim solution is, and maybe the interim solution becomes part of a permanent solution. I don't know. But it doesn't feel like it's going to be very satisfying to citizens to say, wait 3 to 7 years and you'll get 1 or 2 or maybe 3 dog parks that are going to cost this much money, and it's going to take us this long to get the money. And meanwhile, you know, we're not going to let you run your dogs. So I'm interested in having that conversation sooner than later because it could have some modest budget implications if as we just met, as was just mentioned. So
All right. Anything else? All right. We'll jump to another priority that was adopted last fiscal year. So employee talent retention, funding of merit increases, full market study increases. In addition, the administration presented a 5-year public safety staffing plan. Identifying ongoing funding sources for police and fire is not an easy thing to do. It's always nice to have more public safety. Scott and I had a pretty lengthy conversation about this, and there are lots of different metrics to gauge what is sufficient public safety, and I think Chief Evie and his team done a great job of looking at what's most appropriate for Provo, not just what is a national standard. But still adding those positions costs quite a bit of money. That has been a priority in the past. Didn't know if there were thoughts moving forward on if that is something you would like to see on the police side, on the fire side. Fire did a great job in receiving a federal safer grant for 9 firefighters. Thankfully don't have to pay for those employees for 3 years, but after that point is the what do we do now? You know, is it worth making a priority to start budgeting for that so that it's not a big hit in 3 years? Or do you wait and fund those priorities that you have now and then bite the bullet in 3 years? So there are different approaches there, but just wanted to get some thoughts and ideas from the council on if those are priorities, and if there are any questions.
Yeah, I want to express support for both. I think the COLA is very important. Will always be important for the city to retain best employees. Human resources in the city are one of the most important assets we have. I tell people all the time that that's one of the secrets of Provo. Maybe it's not too secret, but I don't feel like you staff members have the face and name recognition in the community. Maybe Vern does, because everyone interacts with Vern.
Look at that face.
I know it's kind of hard to resist, you know. But I think our staff are amazing, and I think they help the city run so incredibly well. It's one of the reasons why we win a lot of awards and so on and so forth. So I think we should be really careful to make sure that we don't compromise on that. With regard to the public safety, I have one additional. I wanted to propose something to start having a conversation about. I was just chatting with the mayor briefly, and I apologize. So I haven't talked to Chief Beebe about this. Isaac and I've had maybe just a little bit of a conversation about it, but I remain very committed to the 5-year public safety staffing plan. I think we have to stay on that. I think we need to make it clear that we're not done until and I'll speak mostly about police, but I think it's probably true of fire as well. I don't think we're done until our police officers are actually able to do educational and preventative stuff instead of just responding to calls all the time. And if that's what they're doing, then we're not serving our public as well as we could. And maybe that's how I would measure it. I don't know what the number is, but that's when I think we would know we're there, is when you've got enough resources to say, you know, people keep telling us they're speeding on this street. Let's actually go, you know, put an office there for a couple hours and see what happens, you know. We're so limited in terms of our ability to do that. But I've been spending time talking with. I went on a ride along with Officer Grow to watch interaction with the homeless population, and I've been volunteering at the warming centers and talking with a lot of different people. Isaac and I have been trying to do a ride along with Fred Sheehan, which just hadn't materialized. I finally called him yesterday and had a really good conversation with him. But one thought I've had is that, you know, in my conversations with Officer Grow and with some of the folks in the homeless community and those who work with them, is that these are people who have you know, 6 different levels of really serious issues: physical health, mental health, you know, family relations, severe trauma in their lives, extraordinary. I mean, it's a full-blown humanitarian crisis for these people individually, and there's up to 70 people now at the warming centers, and they don't think that's, you know, everybody. And the officers, Officer Grow said that, you know, that they're not exactly trained as police or you know, equipped as police officers to deal with all of those issues, right? I mean, we were on a call because a landowner had some people camping on his property, and he had to put the sign out and say, you know, you're not. And he's fantastic. His partner, I'm not remembering his name, but they were very humane. They were wonderful with the people they interacted with. But in the conversations we had with those people, it was very clear that there was 5 or 6 other issues that the police couldn't possibly be in a position to work with them on, let alone with the time limits that they had. And this is only one part of Officer Grow's portfolio. And it seems like they're among some best practices that are emerging is that the point of contact can be a social worker rather than a police officer, in part because police officers can be very triggering for a lot of these people. And the police officers, like I say, themselves aren't in a position to immediately hospitalize somebody who might need it, or, get them in a position to diagnose or prescribe something or what have you. And so I asked Officer Grow his opinion about that. He seemed very open to it, was open to having further conversations. So that's just one thing I wanted to propose, is the idea of, and again, I don't want to do anything that steps on the toes of Chief Beebe or the mayor, but I'm wondering if among our plans for public safety and more officers, if we would be open to the idea of having a social worker whose point of contact is the homeless population. That reduces the time that a lot of the officers have to spend on that, which doesn't seem as well spent, and sometimes, like I say, it is not as they're not as able to be effective in helping these people with their issues. And Fred Sheehan is he's got a different. He's not a social worker. He's a peer support specialist. He's a former homeless person, and he says peer support people have a really unique ability to, immediately gain trust and get people to go where they need to go almost immediately. I mean, if the police officer has to say, you can get in my car and I'll drive you to this place, sometimes they'll get resistance, even though the officer means really well. So there's maybe the possibility of needing, like a social worker and a peer support person as a team who are reaching out. I haven't looked into any of the financial implications, but I would just love to have more conversation about it in the broader context of saying I'm still very supportive of meeting our public safety staffing needs. And if this seems like something that, Chief, you think warrants looking into and are open to that discussion, I'd love to have it and see if it can be part of something that we do to help our police officers serve our public better. So
now, when I did the Citizens Police Academy, one of the huge benefits we have of living in Provo is that we have Wasatch Mental Health. Wasatch Mental Health works really closely with the police, and they do call on them. They know the homeless. They work as a routine pair every day. It's a huge asset. It's other assets that like Lehigh and American Fork, like they all wish they had that. They don't, because we are the epicenter right by Wasatch Mental Health. We do have that. So my understanding is we already have that in place.
Yeah, response for crisis.
but not as the point of contact on the daily calls and the interactions that the COP are doing. Anyway, that's the conversation I'd like to have. I don't pretend to know the answer.
Want to say something about it?
Yeah. Very good.
We're good.
So there is a response that we have, and we've partnered with many of our surrounding resources to respond to this very thing, especially when they're in crisis. The police officer does have the authority, if they're a danger to themselves or others, to excuse me, commit them. It's only us and doctor. But this is not the case in most of the time, most of our contacts. And we see that there are multiple societal issues that these individuals are having. The root that I've found, there's two. One is mental health, the other one is addiction. And we're seeing inside of warming centers an increased amount of criminal activity. And so they're not only coming from other jurisdictions to Provo, to the warming center, but they are increasing the crime that's occurring in our city. And then when we do enforcement activities, it will then go out to these camps locations. So there's a couple of different things that you're pointing out, and to increase the number of officers and to increase a social worker or someone that's able to respond to the first number of issues.
is a good plan. And we have that within our city to draw from when we need to. It would just be a matter of budgetary priorities as far as working with the team. We have the team in place. We bring up this group of people every Tuesday. We meet with our community partners and we go through each of them personally. That's something that doesn't happen. So it's an approach that we're doing very well in that arena. Look at how we can bring in the professionals.
Well, I mean, can you speak to whether or not you think it would be useful to your police officers if we had a city employee who was more directly the point of contact for the homeless, that's the social worker, or I don't, or a hybrid or something, I don't know.
Quite frankly, I haven't called Wasatch and had them not respond. But I would say that it wouldn't be. And to have one that is on our team and out with us responding constantly, that would be a luxury. We haven't contacted Wasatch and had them say, hey, we're not going to respond, or we're not going to be there for you. So I think it would be redundant.
Okay.
As far as police, I know one thing, I've gotten a lot of calls this year on the traffic thing, like you were mentioning. I guess on speeding, and people say that why aren't the police ever monitoring roads or speeding? That is one thing I've heard a lot of this year. Becky?
Okay, so as far as fire goes, I don't see the fire chief here. I have spoken with a former fire chief from here in Provo, and he seems to think that there is a lot of need for more fire personnel. But I have spoken with some employees off the books, and it's kind of like a wait and see kind of a thing. So I guess for me, it would be more of, can we get the police chief? We got the police chief. Can we get the fire chief to say yes or no? I am looking at a need of more firefighters in the next 4 years or 2 years, or would it be beneficial this year? Because I don't want to say, hey, I'm going to send you 5 employees and you don't need them. I would just rather have him come to us and say, can you please make that a priority? Michael's got his hand raised.
Got Chief Edmond online, hand raised and.
Okay.
Go ahead, Chief.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate that, Counselor Bogdan. We've hired the 9 firefighters. That has given us the ability to staff Station 1, and that's a step in the right direction for the fire department. That's an additional 9 firefighters that we haven't had in my career, so it's phenomenal. Is there a need for more? Potentially, if I could have the world, I would have 1 additional firefighter on every fire apparatus in the city. Is that a realistic goal? I would say maybe in baby steps. What we've done is we've put a 3-handed fire engine at Station 1 that increases our capabilities in the city significantly. I've been in the city now for 29 years, and that's the first time. This is the first big addition of fire staffing we've had that we've maintained to this point in that 29 years. So, and the city's grown, and the fire department does an outstanding job responding to the calls that we get. Could we be better? There's always room, but overwhelmingly, I think we're providing a great service. We meet our response criteria 80% of the time, which is the national standard. The only times we don't meet our response time criteria is when we get a second or third call into a district that's already on a call.
So Chief Hedman, would you rather see the funding for three firefighters for the next 3 years, or would you rather have the wait and see approach and see if we need all 9 in 3 years?
Well, I would rather see us begin to fund it now so that when we hit the end of the 3 years, we're not in a position where we have to come up with a full $1 million, because that's a big chunk of change for us to come up with per year all at once. I feel like the baby step into funding the 9 firefighters is the way to go. That gives us the ability to kind of slowly bite off the needs as we go, rather than my fear is that at the end of the 3 years, which is really 2.5 years from now, that we hit that point and then the economy is still in the condition we're in now, and there's just not enough there to do it. Whereas if we have been taking this bite at a time, we will be in a better position and more accustomed to the expense.
Thank you, I appreciate that. So I guess I would be for funding, having that plan.
Yeah, and my understanding is that's what we had been doing, but this year when we were tightening the budget, we stopped that. Is that correct, John?
Well, this year that we're in now, or the last budget year, was the first year that we looked at this, and our initial plan was to include the 3, as the chief had just mentioned. But as we were going through the budget process and trying to balance the budget, we were not able to do it, and so that was one of the items that was pulled as we were weighing different choices and different options, but that was our original intent.
Is that
right?
There also was, and this came from Chief Hedman, and I don't know if this situation has changed, but that this funding for this grant could last longer than what we thought also. And as we get closer to that time, so when we were in a budget need, and the idea of putting away money that is funded for an area. So if 3 years were up that night, we funded that 1 year, but we're back at the same problem right at the end. So what did we gain on that? So there was a little bit of question of how much this labor is covered if we have an extension, that it may go out a little bit further. So we were going to get better information as we look at it for this year. So it does not completely eliminate a problem, and it takes resources that are needed now in a put away program. But I mean, we all probably just have to consider, exactly staffing, and because we got a grant for funding does not mean that we are obligated to fund those positions. We will work with departments and make assessments and do those things on whether or what is that correct funding level together.
Yeah, well, I don't know that this is what it was, because you said it was to staff this station, right?
I think
Correct?
that's how he was utilized, that staffing. Yes.
And so with that 9 went away, then we wouldn't have employees to staff the station.
Well, there's somewhere in between those two, in that he talked about 3 staff per apparatus, to where, we have operated for many, many years at 2 staff per apparatus. And so there's a number of different elements to it that can really create the staffing plan, just like in every department. There's a number of factors that we could work on together.
So could you come up with some kind of a plan for us for the next 5 years of, like, we need to fund 1 firefighter this year, or 2 firefighters this year, 2 firefighters next year, 2 firefighters next year? Because we want to make sure, you understand what we're making sure, right?
Yeah.
That when that funding goes away, that we still have employees to staff that station. That station covers my house, so it's important to me.
All right. It's important to all.
And Michael had his hand raised again.
Yeah. Hey, Chief, I thought you had your hand raised for like a second, or did you have something else to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood that we're 3-handed on 1 fire engine, and that's just station 1. And that's so that all the others are still running 2 and 2, which is, I just want to make sure that I didn't misspeak earlier and make people think had 3 on every fire apparatus. That is not the case. It's just on engine 1 or ladder 1 in this case.
Thanks, Jude.
Chris, could I just follow up with you, Chief, for a minute? So I'm just thinking about it a little bit further. I mean, I guess the question, maybe I'd frame the question differently. Because I don't quite understand, Wasatch Health, you say, is for crisis, but if what I'm suggesting is if we had somebody who was full-time for the city, it seems like the population is not going away, and if we're only responding to the crisis, we're not actually getting to the root of the problem. I'm not pretending that we can make this go away, but I'm just wondering if it actually is more than a luxury to say, well, if we have somebody who's developing really close working relationship with these people, and I know Officer Grow knows them all by name, and I know he's wonderful, but I'm just saying because he himself said, I'm not equipped to handle all their problems. So if we had somebody who's constantly getting them into contact with the resources that they need, that we might actually get some traction on the problem than if we were only waiting. We're either doing the police officers or we're calling a crisis. But most of the time, I mean, it depends on, I guess, how you define crisis. Your technical definition sounds like when it's a threat, when they're a threat to themselves or to somebody else. But otherwise, their life is full-time crisis, right? So I'm just wondering, and maybe I certainly would welcome my other counselors to weigh in on this. I mean, would it be effective, do you think, whether or not it's desirable for funding and otherwise, but do you think it would be effective to get more at the root of the problem if we had somebody who was sort of working with them on a more regular basis rather than just as a crisis call? Yeah.
If I can just speak to it, and again, we haven't had this drive along with Fred Sheehan, but my understanding from what I've heard from Fred, he and one other fellow, their whole job is to go visit with people on site, on the streets. And from what Fred tells me, this is what they're with Wasatch. Okay,
great.
And his indication to me is exuded confidence that if there's a new one, I know about it within a week, and I go meet him and I put my arm around him and I say, hey, you got to come do this and that. And I think you have a good idea, but I think the better idea is let the county and Wasatch continue to handle that. If there needs to be another one of them, if they need 3, maybe that's a conversation. Or if the lag time is 2 hours before they show up on scene. I just met with Sergeant Groth this morning, and he was talking about they generally go visit these sites maybe once a week. So it sounded to me like it's 2 hours of a work week that they are going and trying to see who's out there. And I may be wrong, but that was my impression. So to hire this city full-time person, it's on staff for 40 hours a week, so that during that 2-hour window, we get to take them along with us, or maybe they could go more often. But where there's already someone serving that function and they seem to be doing well, I can't imagine someone better than Fred Sheehan to do this. I think you have a good one.
Maybe we can talk more about this offline. I mean, Fred strongly thought this was a fantastic idea. I mean, and I don't what I asked him was, well, I don't understand why. I mean, because I asked this very question. I was like, I don't understand why we would want to be the ones to hire somebody if Wasatch is already doing it. But it may have something to do with the fact that they're responding again to crises. Maybe they just need a small army of Freds. I'm sure any city would be better with more Freds than fewer. But I don't know. Yeah, I mean, maybe this is something we explore with the county. It's just going to keep impacting our public safety and our citizens and our community. Because it's all happening here in the city of Provo. It's not happening anywhere else, and it's on a lot of our citizens' properties, right? I mean, where I went with Officer Grow, it was there were small islands of civilizations, of campsites that were, he and his partner were in no position to root that out. I don't know how that landowner is handling it. I don't know how they're continuing to deal with it, but and it's because there's only so many hours in a week and he's got a bunch of other stuff to do. So I'm just, you know, wanting to staff the city as adequately to keep pace with the problem. The problem seems like it's growing faster than we are.
And I completely agree with what you're saying. Currently, you know, our function as police officers is to enforce the law. And it's very hard to do that in this population because there's a perception that we're being bullies or being overbearing. And sometimes the work needs to be done with Wasatch and with this personnel. What we're currently doing is reviewing it on every Tuesday. So we have our partners, Wasatch, come in and review individuals.
Yeah.
Each Tuesday. If, you know, and I'm not saying that this redundancy wouldn't be impactful. It may. And it may, maybe we look at, with your idea, maybe we look at contracting with Wasatch and, you know, a split of some sort of a position that would be a made up position, because I don't know of any others that are in this realm. We're very close in the business, if you will, policing. There's response groups that have been designated for the homeless. But as a professional healthcare, it was very difficult to switch hats. So one swears to one, and the other one swears to another, and the police is enforcement. So in taking, I would want to, and the redundancy that we have, I would hate to take away the funds from the goal of having enough personnel to be proactive in our enforcement, like you said, and to look seriously at the airport and what the staffing needs for the police are going to be in the airport with the gates that open up. We'll have to have full-time operation with 12 officers, which we're currently pushing it forward. So there's a lot of other things that I would with that funding towards the redundancy that we currently have. That's just
George, are you imagining the type of person so that if somebody calls in and says, I need help with this, that the social worker would respond instead of the police?
Yeah, possibly, or like I say, the point of contact being this person as opposed to the police right away, because they can sit down with a person for an hour and figure out, you know, did you get that medical appointment that we talked to you about? Did you, because Officer Grove was having some of those conversations, but he had to keep moving. He didn't have the time or the resources to be able to, you know, fully address all the needs that the person had.
Because I can imagine it being almost like a different department or a subsection like animal control or victims advocates or something like that, right? I don't know if it's necessarily one person, but like a little team. If they could handle those initial calls, then that would probably be more cost effective because they would cost less than police officers. But I don't know if they would be able to handle such a thing on their own, because we may actually need the enforcement and that authority to come up. Is that the issue there?
our current team that we have in the police department is for community oriented policing.
Yeah.
They're certified officers that provide a protection when they show up. So usually when they ask us to do counts of the homeless, they request us to come do the security for those counts. Some of the clientele that you're talking about, truly are resource resistant, and those that want resources that have wraparound services and the things that they need require them to follow rules, and they refuse to follow those rules. So it's very difficult. It's a difficult position, and like you said, I don't know if we solve it. We can do better, and we do really well comparatively with the team that we have, and the partnerships is absolutely amazing. So if you haven't gone to our Tuesday meeting,
I intend, Officer Grove told me about that meeting, and it's a difficult day for me, but I've been meaning to go, so I will definitely try to get there this year.
Yeah. Well, and the other question I have about this is I'm wondering if it may be better if we keep that separate from the city and the police department, because there is some mistrust with the population for your officers.
I would debate that, because the ones that we show up and we have this, if they know us, it's completely different.
Okay.
So we have built a relationship with them, and Sergeant Grove is an excellent example. If you say grow, the population knows it, and there's a sense of trust, and we're able to get a lot done with that. Relationships matter, and that face-to-face communication and care that he provides to them, just even in knowing their situation and what they need, gives that to them. So it's building those relationships and trust. It's not the man showing up, and yet sometimes that's exactly what we have to do with theirs.
So in your view, would it matter if such a first contact social worker position were housed in the police department, or if it were somebody who contracted with an outside agency? Does that make a difference? Okay.
Because we're currently meeting and discussing each one of them, and then they know. Red comes out and does kind of the same thing that you're talking about. Almost that we do that. And I really want to help in this arena. This is a big deal, especially within the warming centers and the increase that we've seen. That's something that we have answers to everybody.
Well, thank you. So we understand that your priority would be that there doesn't need more money in the 5-year safety plan and get more people. And that would be a priority for the funds. Thank you. Right, Justin?
All right. So, the overarching priority came from last year of just efficient delivery of current valued Provo city services projects and programs. This was really focused on a number of places that the council had talked about additional staffing over the last couple of years. So one was in the airport. Part of this was just being self-sustaining in operations, with growth of the airport, additional public safety, covering of capital expenses and the current land loan. But also we had the discussion just a couple of work meetings ago with the addition of 2 employees. Is there more staffing needed at the airport? Other 2 that have come up have been additional code enforcement or specific rental dwelling license contact or staff, or additional parking enforcement staff. And the last, this is more of an update. This is ongoing, and it really ties into the next one as well. But exploring full cost recovery, that's been a priority of the council, and we've been working closely with John and his team and the departments and Scott and the administration on having the departments come together and put together what full cost recovery would be for fees, and they will present those as part of their budget presentations. So that was real quick running through. Any specific questions?
I think additional enforcement goes along with what Craig was saying with homeownership.
Yes.
need to maybe revision that a little bit.
There's been, we talked about this a little bit in budget season last year. There's been some requests by a few departments, and I won't get into specifics in this meeting, but that have not been funded for the last couple of years. They've gone on 2-3 years. Some of them are pretty important. Maybe a closed door meeting kind of important. And so those do concern me. They've been overlooked for a few years. If they're really important, we probably should look at covering those. If they're not important, we probably should look at nixing those. Just because they're continued requests. That's just my very thought. Justin, do you know which ones those are? We talked about them last year.
I don't have the list with me, but I can pull those up and provide them to the council.
Thanks.
Yep, absolutely.
If I can just maybe put a point of clarity to this. I believe it was originally worded as maintain. The whole idea was maintain all the good we're doing because it was an acknowledgement. I think this one was advanced by the administration. Remember, there were two that were advanced by the administration. This one was trying to call out. It wasn't saying, hey, let's get efficient in our delivery of service. This was saying maintain what we're doing because in a year where there's not a budget increase, anytime you say this is our number one priority, we were trying to just insert, well, one of our priorities is keep everything that we're doing well because we're in a situation where to add this is going to mean subtract that. And so that was the intent of this one, in case that wasn't clear in just discussing it here. Sure.
Right. And the last was we put together just a list of organizational efficiencies and taxation. These are kind of topics each year, especially in tight budget years. You know, there are a number of places that departments and the administration were really thorough in looking for budget savings in the last budget. And that may have to happen again this year. So are there specific areas where you see there could be potential budget savings? You know, some of those are savings, others are increased revenue, such as the study that we're doing to make sure there's full cost recovery in the fee schedule. We've talked a little bit last year about merchant fees, and there's kind of a test going on right now with Justice Court. But are there other efficiencies that you see that would be beneficial that you would consider a priority for this budget? And then additional, you know, this is something more just to think about as we come into an election year and the RAP tax renewal, which will be on the ballot. And then I'm sure everyone would like to have a very lengthy discussion about property taxes or not. I would appreciate that. Just thoughts of potential signals to the administration of what you would like to see.
Well, I've appreciated seeing all of the signs at our parks and trails saying this was paid for by your RAP tax dollars. I think that's really good messaging, and I appreciate that they've only appeared in this last year so that they haven't become completely invisible to everybody as we're coming into the season to renew that. We have been able to do a lot of good with that money. You've really used that well for our trails and parks. And how heavy of a lift do you think it will be to have our citizens say, yeah, let's do that again? Who's lifting?
Yeah. Last time we passed, it was 60% approval, right about there, about the same as the recreation center bond. So I think there's been a couple of times where our Parks and Recreation Department has gone before the citizens in election and has shown favorable. If we are able to tell the story that you just told, Rachel, and talk about the exciting things that have come out of the RAP tax, I think that 0.1%, and when we're having people visit our community to go to sporting events, big games, art shows, and they're all helping pay for this. I think the the cost benefit has a pretty good argument to it. So we're hoping that, at least I'm hoping that there's still that same support level now as what there was, because you're right, there is a lot of great things that have happened with that RAP tax and that capital infusion.
Is it a 4-year term, 5-year?
10-year.
10-year term?
No, I think
Will
it's,
there be
I think it's 5.
will there be a campaign?
Yeah, so it's gonna have.
It's 10 years, John Forgas.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, are we gonna?
Maybe I was only on duty on 5.
And is the amount that the RAP tax can be set by state law, or do we have flexibility in what the percentage is?
I don't think there's flexibility. It's
There's-
They're not.
That's what I thought, but I wanted to be sure.
So is there a campaign for this?
Well, and that raises the other question, is that there are state law limitations on the expenditure of public funds in favor or against a ballot proposition. So it actually has to be, we have to kind of outsource. We hold meetings and present information. Private citizens who care run campaigns. Same as the rec center bond.
They ran.
And I think those models were used where it was citizen driven boards that did the whole thing for both the rec center and the RAP tax campaign. It was very successful.
So not a city campaign.
Not a city.
And you know, and we've done this before with, for instance, the bond. We do it typically for the employees when we come into campaign season. But having this discussion reminds me that in the relatively near future, I need to send to all of you an explanation of what those rules are, because some of the rules are what you can even use city email for with regard to election issues. So I'll send you an update.
So would this be like the arts board, you would have like the Parks and Rec board, you would try to solicit them to come
I
out?
would assume that would be the starting point with the citizens, and that always has been. Our Parks and Recreation Citizen Board has always been the start of creating that support group to run the campaign.
Doesn't the Covey have like the arts board too?
We have an arts council, yes,
And so they could also be a part of that discussion
they could.
and that campaign.
I would go out on a limb and say, I don't think this will be all that controversial. I mean, I think this is our city surveys indicate very high levels of value and satisfaction with the services we provide with regard to parks and recreation and the arts. I don't know.
A campaign may be nothing more than this will be on the ballot. Watch for it. Otherwise they could get to the ballot and not realize this.
Well, just putting out ideas, Beth and I sat at that farmer's market for every Saturday for like 3 months for the police citizen advisory board for this building. So, I mean, there's different levels of dedication. We spoke with a ton of people, we handed out a ton of literature.
So to muddy the water a bit, with regard to the property tax increase, I mean, if we're talking about the public safety priority that we just made, and we also, you know, did approve property tax increase for the library, but it was not everything that they needed. I don't know what their financial picture looks like coming up this next year, but I'm just wondering if, what's that? It's much better. That's good news. Yeah.
We have a board meeting tomorrow if you're
Okay.
interested.
I have class tomorrow, first day of classes. So, I mean, I guess I'm just wondering if there's an appetite for a cost of living increase on property tax that we had done 2 years in a row. We didn't do that last year, but then we ended up doing an increase for the library. But in the past, that was been a useful mechanism for helping fund for police officers. I know I'm raising a very unpopular topic, but I just want to get a read on what the rest of the council thinks about that. That's
I think the district
realm
is
of
gonna do one
possibility.
this year.
What's
In my
that?
discussions with Terry, I think the district will do one this year. And the county, did it already go into effect or will it go into effect this next year?
I think they've announced.
I think they've already approved it.
We're hearing about it already, so.
So you think it was already November that they built for it? Yeah, so they had a significant tax increase already as well, so. I don't know. My other thought would be, you know, if the tax that we would propose this year would be too high, would give residents say, you know, you're already getting your money from me from this, why should I give you that tax? But I don't know, and cause that just seems like a tax on top of tax. A lot of them are just really feeling a pinch.
So I really liked that the first 2 years I was on the council, we did that very modest little increase. And we said why we were doing it. Because of the way the truth in taxation is set up, like our spending power goes down every year that we don't do a modest increase. Like we seriously fall behind. I felt a little bit bad that we didn't continue that very modest pattern last year as well. I think it would be healthier financially for the city and to set expectations for our citizens that it is going to go up, that and go up is even the not right term for it, right? But that we will always authorize like that 2 or 3%, whatever it is, increase, so that it's not a surprise, it's just built into what we do. We always have this conversation. Because otherwise, I think we are being financially imprudent. We're putting ourselves in a bad position going into the future. The fact that we hadn't done even modest little raises for what, like 15 years before we did those last two, I think was a huge disservice to our people and to our taxpayers. And I'm glad that we didn't have to do a big jump like what the county has decided to do. But I think establishing a pattern of always doing that very modest little increase. And honestly, the increases that we've done have only been a few dollars per month per household. It's really been very, very, very modest. But if we don't do that, the amount that we fall behind becomes very big, very quickly. So I would be in favor of doing a modest increase, even though we know there are going to be other ones. And honestly, if the school district is doing it and everything else, when we do our truth and taxation meetings, people will come and they'll be very unhappy and they'll yell at us about the school district one. And we'll say, yes, your bill is going up by $80 for them, but for us, it's only $2. Like, oh, okay, you're not the bad guys here. Because we really aren't. We're using these tax monies to support the services for our citizens. And our administration has been incredibly cautious and careful in how they use that money. And I think we need to give our citizens the opportunity to have these conversations that yes, we're doing it. And they're not going to come and talk to us about how the taxes are spent unless we do the truth in taxation. So that's another reason I think we should do that little modest increase every year. But mostly it's about resetting expectations. And we can only do that through consistency.
There you go.
Michael's.
Yeah, sorry, I'm a little bit late on it, but just on the wrap tax, kind of voting margins, I just looked up. In 2023, Orem had it on their ballot and it passed by, so with 64% approving. And just recently this year in Mapleton, they had it on the ballot, but this one wasn't a renewal. I believe it was a first time proposition of the tax and it passed with 51%.
Ooh, squeaker.
But the question would be is, did they have a tax hike, property tax hike in that same year?
I don't know. I'm just looked at just the election results.
Because that would be my question is does that correlate? I mean, does the public look at that and say, you're already getting your chunk of money, why should I give you this? Thanks.
What else you got, Justin?
All right, well. Great. So here's just kind of a quick overview of those bullet points. A few have been added, a few I think can be pulled off there based off of the feedback. If you're comfortable and want to move forward, we can take a quick break, kind of organize this a little bit and do a preliminary exercise in voting, just so that when we come back at the next meeting, we can have a little idea of where to go further. Then wrap it up and have some more discussion in the future.
So as far as like Melissa's priorities when they do all that home funding and whatever that they look at, I know that we had this discussion this last year that we had put sidewalks on there and then they did the bulb outs or whatever. And we talked about, well, we should give them some direction before. Do we do that separate from this document? Because I know Melissa's stuff is completely in a different realm than the budget. Or is this still good? Because I know one of them was a CBG, whatever that is, funding.
Yes.
I always get those E's and B's mixed up. Yeah, do we just move that to another spot that's like Melissa's priorities?
Well,
Yeah,
well,
I think we don't
technically, we're not allowed to influence that.
We're
We're
not.
not allowed to. If they have a committee, they vote on it
And it's not just Provo, it's or CDBGs or.
yeah, so we're not legally allowed to tell them what to do or influence things.
But if we wanted to
We make
support those
rebates.
programs, couldn't we put more money into their pots or partner with their agencies or something like that? Like we could
We can't.
work with them additionally,
Yeah, I don't know.
if that were one of our priorities.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why Melissa comes to us to. I mean,
Well,
she
we're the
brings-
final vote, but we aren't allowed to say, we're not allowed to move the, like, I don't know, I was told that we're not allowed, that the committee has to be the voting and they have to go off of that, but maybe I'm wrong.
Well, I mean, it's kind of like the planning commission, right? I mean, we've had this discussion before about planning commission stuff, because sometimes most planning commission stuff comes to them without you necessarily even being aware of it until after they're already done with it. But sometimes there's stuff that actually originates here and goes to planning.
Okay, so we can't influence the time, but when
Yeah.
we do our vote, we can totally change the
We can
numbers, be
change
like,
it.
no, we're
Right.
But
doing
what we
this all
can't
in
do
a
is
year.
go to their meeting and say,
And say stuff.
you need to fund
Okay.
this
That makes
organization.
sense.
Right.
Public comment.
Right, and you shouldn't.
Yes,
like,
I wasn't allowed to talk at the meeting.
Yeah, and again, like with.
We can go, we just,
Like with planning commission, right? You shouldn't send something to them and say, hey, state law requires you to give us a recommendation on this, but the recommendation better be yes. Right? I mean, they need to be independent in their review about what they think. On the same time, if you do send something over to them, and I'm talking in planning commission by analogy, but to these other groups too, if you want to give them feedback about your thought process beforehand, you're welcome to do that, but you want to let them do an independent analysis because that's what their job is.
I thought it was very helpful. Rachel and I went 2 years ago, and I thought it was very helpful. So, because the reason I wanted to go was that Melissa would come to us and say, you know, this organization is only getting funded at 25% of what they asked. And I was like, well, why? And what, does that help them? I mean, sometimes you give them 25% of what they ask and they can do nothing with it because they needed at least, you know, twice that or something. So it was helpful to go to the meeting and listen to the presentations by the organizations and understand what they do, what their financial needs are, and listen to how they were deliberating. And then that gave me a better perspective when Melissa came to us and said, you know, this is what they recommend. I had a little more confidence that I knew what was going
Jerry
on.
Patrice and I did that last year.
Oh, okay.
So we had a chance to just.
And the committees,
It's very interesting.
I mean, the committee's made up of certain people from certain parts of town, that definitely plays a part.
Yeah.
It was very obvious to us.
Yeah.
But, yeah, okay, that makes sense though.
Sorry, I
we
didn't
can-
mean to, I forgot that you went last.
No, it
year,
was very
so-
helpful.
So we
Yeah.
can
I
change
thought it was
it
very-
however
yeah.
we want in the vote.
Well, I just know we discussed that last time and it was said that we probably needed to give them some direction, but if we can't give them direction, then I guess we just change that for the vote if that is our priority. But is it helpful to just say this is our could we say like the same thing? This is our priorities for funding?
Yeah, I mean, for example, if you wanted to give Melissa some feedback to take to them when they meet, if you wanted to issue something that kind of said, here are the council priorities related to how that are relevant to your decisions and why we have them. Thanks for considering them. Great. And then they have the ability to completely ignore them when they make their independent decision or take them into account. But at the end of the day, you know, their job is to be making the recommendations that they think are appropriate, not trying to guess what you want. Right? Because that's ultimately your decision.
Thanks.
We taking a break?
Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect. All about
Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
It's just abbreviated in your links. We took out what seemed to not really be a super big priority or a priority to what seemed like a majority of the council. But we left them fairly broad so that as we have a subsequent discussion can kind of drill down. In addition, Scott and I kind of talked, and leaving this broad allows for the administration to come back and talk about what the departments are doing in this space. And I think will help us narrow those priorities as well. So
How many votes do we have?
Yeah, okay, everyone, so if you could all please go to your emails. I sent you an email that has a link next to your name. That is your individual voting link. So please click on the link next to your name or else you will break the system.
System will go down.
We have 121 credits to vote.
We each have 121?
Yeah. So it's basically the number of choices that we have squared is I don't need to explain math to you. But anyways, the more times you vote for something, the more credits it spends. So you can vote for something 11 times, but it'll take 121 of your credits away. So does anybody have any questions?
So to cast more votes, it costs you.
And if you cast more votes, it costs more. So if you vote for something once, it costs 1. But if you vote for it twice, it costs 4. 3, 9 goes up by square.
And it's just the 1, 2, 3, 4.
The ones on the screen. Yeah, so we put an abbreviation, so just like HOO is how under the category housing and owner occupancy PS.
Yeah,
Figure
that out. What is infrastructure capacity? I think I understand what reimagining enforcement is, but what is infrastructure capacity?
Justin, you made that bullet point, so let's have you.
Money on the infrastructure to allow more density.
Okay, yeah.
And two, we were kind of asked, can we put them in priority order? So our most important thing is number 1.
Just add.
Well, I mean, when it goes to an administration as well.
That's what this is gonna do.
That's what I mean.
Okay.
So this is, well, we're not like voting officially right now, when we're done, I'm gonna pull over this and it's going to show kind of what it is. This is just to get the conversation going and kind of have be a jump off point, so.
Wait, so infrastructure capacity is not kind of the conversation we had today about how
It's
this is
sewers and making sure we've got the.
So
Your point.
yeah, left it broad as bold. So is it increasing? Do we need to increase capacity for density? Is it increasing capacity to get those entitled units done that need to be finished?
So it is that whole
Yep,
conversation.
that whole
we had
conversation.
today.
Yep.
Yeah, so just, you can use your votes and there's like a plus or minus button on there, and then when you're done, there should be a button somewhere on there that says submit
At the top.
at the top, so. Do you have any questions, Malia or Chad can help you with any technical difficulties you may have?
One thing I wanted to say, like, if you vote for one thing, you can vote for one thing 11 times, but if you diversify your votes, you have like, I think about up to 30 votes. Like, total, right? If you
That's good to know.
diversify your credits, right? So if you really are into one thing, you can double 11 votes, but you can have more representation if you spread it around. But you can consciously not vote for things.
That also means.
You're not into it.
Well, and I'm a little concerned because there may be some overlap between the reimagining enforcement and the.
Yeah,
code
let's get rid of
enforcement.
code enforcement.
Well, that's something,
That's,
this isn't perfect, we can talk about that once we see
Okay.
what the votes
They
are.
are
If you don't vote for something and you want that to be known, should I just say that? Because we can always change.
Right,
And
like
again-
if I chose one, but everybody
Yeah.
else chose the other.
Yeah, you can be like, oh, that's what I meant to, or I meant to.
That's what this is, okay.
If I have one vote left, it's not letting me do it. Does that just mean I'm done?
You could only cast it for something that would only require one vote.
yeah.
credit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some
Why
people
do you
look
vote
at
for
it.
something
Because-
and add it to one that
You can only vote for something you haven't voted for.
Yeah, because it would take like 4 votes to vote again.
Gotcha, thank you.
Yes, you might have some extra credits, but you can't cast them, don't worry about it. But-
I'm done.
Yeah, put it on dog park.
Just kidding, no. That way. First one is in.
Oh, wrong.
Oh, we got 3 in.
So when we see 121 points on reimagining enforcement, we all know who did that.
Pretty much, pretty much.
Unfortunately, I don't know, I can't tell the number of
Since that's
credits
basically
that
what you
was
said.
used, but so
That's
far
all
it
our
is.
Okay, you're gonna start losing votes if you can't get them in.
Dude, already?
Already.
Yeah, they're-
We're 5 out of 7, doing good.
What? Man, you guys are fast.
We know who has their priorities straight here.
We know what we want. We want.
Where have you been the last 10 hours?
We are at 6 out of 7.
Oh, seriously, okay. Fine. We'll stop dropping 4s and 8s in here, 4s and 9s in here.
I've never.
No, take your time.
Done one like that.
Oh, really? That's cool.
That's kind of cool, like
Yeah,
the,
yeah.
like.
Wasn't it so bad? We did it last year. didn't we, vote like this?
Maybe we did. Did we do it like this last year?
We did, like,
With the square root thing? Okay, I like it. I think it's smart system.
Billion more rule points, and we did like 5 or 6 rounds.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm almost done.
You guys already knew how to do it.
I'd like to see how you guys vote.
I can vote.
I know, I'd love to see it.
Yeah, this is straight from the GFOA magazine.
She gets the final vote. We get to decide whether we want to send it back to her.
Yeah, squash it or not.
Maybe Travis is doing just compliments to the council and staff about the last year was awesome. That was like this year on the city budget, but getting these priorities and this work ahead of time for the development just made sense.
Really?
So many years it was done towards the end, and I think it allowed us to deliver a more satisfactory product at the end. And I thought just from today, the sidewalks and pedestrian safety example was a great example of a general statement that the city could come back, and Public Works, they've all left so I can compliment them now, but they came back and they not only worked at the start and showed what they did, but they used opportunities and funding elements throughout the year to be able to report that. So even these general priorities creates a focus amongst the staff, and the mayor refers to them all the time, you know, that it is in a constant focus. So we can build on this stuff, because I think I've said a few times, not all the ideas happen in February and March during budget development, but kudos to your process.
Now I see the answers, I'm gonna change mine.
Well, they did. The thing that they did do is, I did get a few complaints about this asphalt pathway. They felt robbed of not having the concrete, and they turned around and they figured out how to do that.
And they didn't love that idea either. It was just budget, right? Money, but then it came in strong and that was great.
So that's appreciated too, and I'm sure it's appreciated by the residents that complained that never did come back and say thank you, but.
That clarity of priority really.
I send your bunch of queries, certified, I send it to you, and then I remind them, the whole budget's on it. So the priority.
All right, we are done.
Our
discussion.
But I needed a partner, the guy that I was working in programs failed on. Couldn't find a replacement.
Submitted, I swear I tapped something on parking enforcement, yeah, it shows 0. That means like it's minimal.
Oh yeah, less than 5. It looks like it starts at 5. Well, I downloaded the spreadsheet. 1 second, I got like 10 tabs open.
And maybe that's what I did.
Okay, yeah, so
it's anything less than 5 is not.
yeah, here, let me just turn the spreadsheet into a chart real quick, and then we can see it. Okay. Don't laugh at me, I just like made this data visualization in 1 second. Okay, parking enforcement does that.
Okay.
Well, there's a clear place where it really picks up. Land acquisition on it.
All right,
But for me, nothing
any
surprises.
other priorities?
No. You know, based on our discussion.
No, very consistent.
Imagine that.
So I guess our question for you now is how do we want to go from there? It looks like we have from categories, we have housing owner occupancy was definitely number 1 with the sub bullet point of the reimagining enforcement. We have what did ER stand for?
Public safety.
Just public safety.
Yeah, public safety personnel, sidewalks and schools. Those were the big 3. Land acquisition was kind of a close 4th place.
So, can I ask my fellow counselors about, I mean, I'm a little surprised COLA is as low as it is. And I'm worried that I didn't vote for the airport,
for the reasons I specified earlier. I just didn't think it was, not because I don't think it's a priority, but because I didn't think it was a budget priority without knowing anything in advance. So I don't know if anyone else felt similarly, or I'm just wondering if
Well, I think you.
I misread that.
No, I think you can always say that, all of it. I put some to the airport. I don't know what the need is just yet. It seems important. I didn't mark the COLAs really high because I just feel like we'll have that discussion and we'll figure that out. I don't know, that's a voting thing. So I felt I put the votes in terms of where I think we ought to put the focus, not necessarily what we ought to vote on.
You know, last time the administration brought us two things, which is appropriate, we agreed on them.
Yeah.
You know, so I think that that's a good, you know, we have our top three, and if they have, like, what they like to add, I think that's great, we'd love to, like, that's great, good. Lots to talk about.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to understand, like, I was worried about the message being sent that, oh, we don't want you to worry about COLA, and I'm like, oh.
But didn't we take care of COLA last year?
Yeah, I think the question would be, like, for example,
We haven't
imagine
been living,
you
we're not
had
gonna live for
imagine they delivered a budget to you today that had no COLA. Would you be disappointed?
Yes.
Would be the question. And right now, you're sending the signal that, like, if you would be okay with a budget without a COLA, unless it's not your top priority.
I don't
As a
Wait, and look, we're not looking for all of these to be a top priority. They by definition, they're not all going to be the same. The fact that any of these are up here, these are things we want to pay attention to, because there's 40 things that aren't up here. So all of those things we want to pay attention to. I didn't allocate to extra the COLA. I voted for the COLA, but I didn't extra it, not because I don't see the need for it. I don't see it as a priority in terms of the discretionary effort that we should put focus on. That's how I voted.
Like, we don't spend our time on it, right?
Yeah.
We don't spend our time making policy or discussing it, in like, it's gonna happen.
Well, okay, that's what I wanted to make sure you were clear on, that it wasn't like, yeah.
No.
That relationship, the reason the city works so well is because our employees, even those in the room right now, feel valued.
Yeah.
With that sends a message, we value you.
Yeah.
And then they are willing to come out
And
in
that
the middle of the
COLA,
night.
it's actually an interesting question. The COLA goes to the council staff.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
They're all, and it's going with them all the way to, it does.
Because a lot of stuff, like, we are separate, I know that we are.
No.
Yeah, I hope that the message that's being sent
Yeah.
is, that's important to us as well.
That's helpful because that's your staff that gets it.
Well, I mean, look, it's like you have the 2 or 3 that are outstanding. The rest of them are pretty much the same, all the way down to code enforcement. So yeah, I wouldn't misinterpret this.
Yeah, I really like what we did last year. I like getting the top 3, and then you guys brought us, 2. I think that was really appropriate. Then we discussed it. And that's why we do want to meet together.
Yeah.
And I think this is an opportunity for us to let you know things that we think are priorities that maybe you wouldn't automatically be doing. We expect that you're going to be doing a COLA. You've established that precedent, and we want that to continue. And so we don't need to fuss about it a lot. Like, that's given. We expect that from you. We want that. But to do something like completely reimagine enforcement, develop a new tool, and maybe put more personnel into it, that's a council idea and priority that you haven't already been working with. And so since it's a new thing, that's where we're saying, okay, we want you to try to incorporate this. And then something like the sidewalks in schools, we know that you've already been giving some money for sidewalks. We just recognized it wasn't enough under the regular plan to do it. So we're saying, no, we really want more in that area. But this list should not be taken to mean that you don't fund IT at all, right? Like, there's certain expectations that we trust you will meet.
So I'm wondering if, John, you have in your crystal ball abilities to predict the future, do you sense that, we are going to be in a position to, I mean, because some of these involve increased, especially like, as Craig put it, the discretionary increases are increases. They're not necessarily, I mean, unless things are so tight that the only way to increase public safety personnel, for example, would be to pull from someplace else. Do we have any expectation that we're gonna have an increased budget? I mean, it seems like it's kind of flat, like it's not gone down, but it hasn't really gone up.
First of all, we are very early in the process.
That's why I refer to your prophetic gifts.
I would also say that, I don't know if I've had a year where the budget wasn't really a challenge. And it looks like it's gonna be a challenging year, but I expect from administration and the mayor that she's gonna have some hopes and some things that we really need to shoot for, and so we'll go to work on it, but it is gonna be a challenging year for sure. But I think, we'll put our heads together and try to meet the council priorities, and there's hopes and plans, and so we'll work towards that.
Yeah, and I would just recognize that if it is a really bad year, what these priorities mean are that we're not making cuts to public safety personnel instead of adding public safety personnel, right? You know, that's the more negative view.
All right, well, I think, Justin, if I'm not wrong, the next steps on this was we're gonna have another priorities meeting in what month?
Yes, so next steps, well, we'll provide this list to the administration, so they've got this, we'll send it to the council as well. And I think with these broad priorities, will allow them to come back. We've got time scheduled in the work meeting on, I believe it's February 11th. For the for the administration to talk about priorities, and hopefully we can finalize a list, so.
Justin, can I just add, I mean, I'm just thinking of my directors, like Bill Browning, who sees reimagining enforcement, homeowner occupancy. Is there any way you can do like a paragraph attached to what your vision, what that means to you?
Absolutely.
So they know what you're thinking.
Yeah.
And then public safety personnel, what are you thinking? Does that mean 2 officers? Does that mean rethinking our way we have? I mean, just a little bit, a paragraph of explanation below each one, so that they're not having to second guess what that one sentence.
That's a good idea.
I think it would be helpful if they came to us with like a 5-year plan, both your fire and your, because I don't think, for me, I can only speak for me. I don't know what BB needs. I don't know what Headman needs. We just want to be supportive in that, but we want to be able to look to the future and say, okay, we have those 9 firefighters. What realistically do you see in the next 5 years as something that you're going to need to be funded? Or in the next 3 years? Right? Because I can't really tell you, BB, here's 2 officers. This is what you're going to get. I think he needs to have some input on that.
And I also just want to say thank you. This is a very helpful exercise instead of just throwing darts at the board. This is very helpful. This is good work.
So objection will now adjourn the provincial council work meeting. Unanimous. Yes.
Reese, you're so close.